My sister told everyone I didn't pay a penny for Mom's birthday dinner. So I canceled my card, walked out, and let the restaurant hand her the $11,200 bill. My sister secretly took credit for the luxury birthday dinner I spent weeks planning and funding, completely erasing my involvement. But when she publicly humiliated me in front of our entire family and told me not to eat the food I supposedly didn't pay for, I decided to maliciously comply. I put on my coat, walked out of the venue, and let the restaurant manager hand her a 5-figure bill she couldn't afford. My name is Chloe, and I am 27 years old. I work as an architect at a high-end commercial design firm in Chicago. My older sister, Sarah, 31, is a freelance lifestyle influencer, which is our family's polite way of saying she is chronically unemployed, terrible with money, and obsessed with curating an image of wealth she doesn't actually possess. For as long as I can remember, Sarah has been the undeniable golden child of our family, and I have been the designated workhorse. When I was 17, I spent an entire summer designing and building a beautiful patio garden for our parents. Sarah took photos of it, posted them on her social media claiming she had designed it, and soaked up the praise. When I graduated college with honors, Sarah gave a toast at my dinner claiming she had guided me through school and edited all my papers, even though we had barely spoken that entire year. Whenever I tried to correct the record and stand up for myself, my mother, Helen, would wave me off. "Don't be so sensitive, Chloe," she would say. "Sarah just wants to feel involved." Real family protects each other. Whenever I stayed quiet to keep the peace, Sarah treated my silence as permission to walk all over me. 3 months ago, my mother called to tell me she wanted a simple but elegant dinner for her 60th birthday. In our family, simple never stayed simple for long. My father, Richard, suggested the Azure Room, a gorgeous, private glass-walled dining room inside a luxury lakeside hotel where my parents had celebrated their 20th anniversary years ago. The moment the venue was suggested, Sarah immediately hijacked the family group chat. She announced that she would handle the entire vision and coordinate the perfect night for Mom. Of course, she completely disappeared the moment the hotel asked for a non-refundable deposit, a signed contractual agreement, and a finalized guest count. I had recently received a massive promotion at my architecture firm. I was finally making excellent money, and despite everything, I loved my mother. I wanted her to have a beautiful night where no one argued, no one stressed about the cost, and no one compared Sarah and me. So, I secretly contacted the event coordinator, a deeply professional man named Marcus. I signed the contract, paid a $2,500 non-refundable room deposit, and authorized my personal credit card for the estimated balance to be charged after the dessert course. I did not tell the family the amount. I only texted Sarah privately to tell her the reservation was fully secured and asked her to send me any dietary restrictions for the family by Friday. She replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. 10 minutes later, she posted in the main family group chat. "Everything is completely taken care of. I secured the Azure Room. Mom deserves the absolute best, and I'm making sure she gets it." Relatives immediately flooded the chat thanking her. My mom sent a string of crying heart emojis, calling Sarah her generous angel. I stared at my phone screen in my office for a long time, wondering why it still hurt so badly to watch Sarah receive endless praise for work she had not done, and money she had not spent. But I swallowed my pride. I wanted the evening to feel like a gift from my mother, not a performance or a competition. The original dinner package was quoted at just under $9,500. But then, Sarah began making unauthorized changes behind my back. She emailed Marcus to add a premium vintage wine pairing, a massive imported seafood tower, custom white orchids imported from Hawaii, and 6 additional guests, random friends of hers I had never even met. Each time Marcus copied me on the email for financial approval, Sarah would reply first, typing, "Approved." Chloe knows. I immediately called Marcus. I made it crystal clear that I was the sole financial backer of this event, and that absolutely no additional charges could be finalized without my direct, written consent. Marcus apologized profusely and flagged my file. I approved the white orchids because they were my mother's favorite, but I rejected the seafood tower, the ridiculous wine pairings, and the extra guests. 2 days later, Sarah called me, absolutely furious. "Why are you making this so difficult?" she snapped. "Mom only turned 60 once. You're ruining my vision." I calmly reminded her that she was more than welcome to pay for the upgrades herself using her own credit card. She let out a sharp, condescending laugh. "You always make money so awkward, Chloe. It's really tacky." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. Sarah wanted the absolute authority and prestige of being a wealthy host, without bearing any of the actual cost. Still, I kept the reservation. I ordered a custom midnight blue and silver cake, prepared a gorgeous slideshow of family photos, and paid for a private car service to transport our grandparents. I even specifically asked Marcus not to announce who had paid at the dinner. "I don't want a speech about me," I told him. "This is entirely for my mother." The night of the party, I arrived 40 minutes early. I wore a tailored emerald green dress and a matching emerald wool coat. Marcus met me in the lobby and reviewed the final estimate. With the service taxes, the private room fee, the food, and the orchids I had approved, the final bill would be exactly $11,200. My card would be charged automatically after the cake was served. I signed the updated authorization form and slipped the carbon copy into my purse. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, sweeping into the room like she owned the hotel. She kissed Mom on both cheeks, loudly complained that the floral centerpieces were a little lower than I envisioned, and immediately began directing the hired photographer. I watched her pull two of our aunts aside to tell them how tirelessly she had worked to curate the menu. I heard every word, but I kept my mouth shut. Part of me was saving the truth for later, but another part was still desperately trying to protect my mother's birthday from becoming a battlefield. When it was time to sit down, Sarah took the seat directly to Mom's right. She then physically picked up my place card, which Marcus had placed in the VIP seat to Mom's left, and moved it to the very far end of the table, right next to the kitchen doors. When I quietly walked over and moved my place card back to the host seat where it belonged, Sarah raised a perfectly threaded eyebrow. "Excuse me, Chloe," she said smoothly. "That seat is reserved for whoever actually organized this event." I met her gaze, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Are you absolutely sure you want to make that the rule tonight, Sarah?" She smirked, clearly thinking I was bluffing, and turned her back to me. I sat down in my original seat anyway. For the first course, she talked over me every time I opened my mouth. During the second course, she loudly accepted compliments about the venue's architecture, claiming she had scouted it for weeks. By the time the main dish of beautiful truffle risotto arrived, she had completely rewritten the entire narrative of the evening with herself at the absolute center, and my mother was happily helping her do it. Then, I reached for the silver serving spoon to put some risotto on my plate. Apparently, taking all the credit was not enough for Sarah. She needed to publicly humiliate me, too. "Don't fill your plate, Chloe," Sarah said, reaching out and tapping the serving spoon with one of her manicured fingers. She didn't whisper, she spoke loudly, ensuring the entire table of 20 people heard her. "You didn't contribute a single penny to this dinner. You really shouldn't be indulging." The conversation around the table instantly collapsed into a suffocating, dead silence. Forks stopped in midair. I felt the old, familiar family reflex take over. Every single relative looked at me, waiting to see how gracefully I would absorb the insult to keep the peace. I looked at my mother. Mom smiled nervously into her wine glass, refusing to make eye contact with me. "Sarah is only teasing, Chloe," she said lightly. Then she turned to the rest of the table and added, "But real family comes first. We should all be so grateful to the people who actually showed up and sacrificed for me tonight." "Thank you, Sarah." I had arrived before everyone. I had signed every single legal document. I had paid a $2,500 deposit and authorized an $11,200 charge. Yet my mother's words made me feel like an uninvited parasite. I looked at Mom and asked calmly, "Who do you believe paid for tonight, Mom?" She looked startled that I had spoken back at all. But before she could answer, Sarah laughed a sharp, mocking sound. "Oh, please. You probably booked the room with Dad's leftover hotel loyalty points and now you expect a parade. Just put the spoon down, Chloe." My cousin Leo lowered his eyes to his lap. My Aunt Clara pretended to intensely adjust her napkin. My father, Richard, suddenly became fascinated by the label on his wine bottle, studying it as though it contained a map to escape the room. I could have opened my purse right then. I could have pulled out the contract and slammed it beside Sarah's plate. I could have listed every phone call, every email, every dollar amount she had stolen credit for. But a sudden, chilling question stopped me. If physical proof was the only language my family respected, why was I still volunteering to finance the lives of people who had already decided I was worthless? I slowly set the silver serving spoon back down on the table. "You know what? You're exactly right, Sarah," I said, my voice eerily calm. Sarah blinked, clearly thrown off. She had expected me to cry, or to argue, or to storm off in a dramatic huff that she could later mock. "I absolutely shouldn't eat food I didn't contribute to," I continued. Mom gave a relieved little laugh, clearly believing I had surrendered and the uncomfortable moment was over. I carefully folded my linen napkin, placed it neatly beside my empty plate, and stood up from the table. Sarah's smirk returned, wider this time. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Chloe. Sit down." "I'm not being dramatic," I said, smoothing my dress. "I'm just correcting the arrangement." I picked up my purse, slipped my arms into my emerald green coat, and walked out of the glass doors toward the lobby. Not a single person followed me. Not my father, not my mother. That realization hurt far more than Sarah's initial insult. But it also burned away any lingering guilt I had about what I was about to do. Marcus was standing at the reception desk in the lobby, reviewing the service notes on his tablet. I walked up to him and asked whether the final charge had been processed on my card yet. "No, Miss Watson," he said politely. "The authorization will officially convert into a charge after the cake is served." "Good," I said. "I need you to completely remove my credit card from the folio." Void the authorization entirely. Marcus paused, his professional demeanor slipping into slight concern. Miss Watson, I must remind you that the $2,500 room deposit is strictly non-refundable. If I remove your card, the remaining balance of $8,700 will become due immediately, and we will have to collect it directly from the party inside. I understand, I replied without hesitation. Please keep the deposit. Consider it the price of my education. But I will not finance another minute of my own humiliation. He hesitated, looking toward the glass doors of the dining room. Would you like me to tell them there has been a technical payment issue to save face? No, I replied, looking him dead in the eye. Tell them the exact truth. Tell them the woman in the green coat canceled the reservation payment and asked you to deliver the bill to the host. Marcus studied my face for a long moment, recognized the absolute finality in my expression, and nodded. Understood. I turned and walked toward the valet desk. But just before I reached the heavy rotating outer doors, I heard my father shout my name from inside the dining room. I stopped and turned around. Through the glass partition, I had a perfect view of the table. I watched Marcus walk up to Sarah, holding a thick black leather folio. He placed it directly beside her plate. Her smug smile vanished instantly. Mom leaned toward him, looking confused. Even through the glass, I could see Marcus speaking. I couldn't hear him, but I knew he was repeating the exact sentence I had requested. I watched the color rapidly drain from Sarah's face. She opened the folio, stared at the 5-figure total, and violently snapped it shut. Dad pushed his chair back so hard it screeched against the floor, and he practically jogged out into the lobby toward me. Chloe, what on earth did you just do? He demanded, his face flushed. Notice his question. Not times what did they say to you? Not times why did you leave? But times what did you do? I looked past him, locking eyes with Sarah through the glass. I stopped paying for a dinner I was explicitly told I had not contributed to. Dad lowered his voice, glancing around nervously. Chloe, please. This is your mother's 60th birthday, and this dinner was my gift to her, I said firmly. But Sarah decided to reject my gift in front of the entire family, and Mom allowed her to do it. I am simply respecting Sarah's decision. Behind him, the glass doors swung open. Sarah stormed out into the lobby, furiously waving the black leather folio in the air. This is completely insane. You can't just abandon us with an $8,700 bill, Chloe. Marcus stepped out behind her, his posture impeccably calm. Excuse me, ma'am, but the financial backer removed her payment method before settlement. The outstanding balance for the food, venue, and service is $8,700, payable immediately. Sarah glared at him. I am the host of this event. I organized this. Marcus calmly opened his tablet. Ma'am, the contract, the deposit receipt, the menu approvals, and the initial card authorization are all exclusively in Chloe Watson's name. The event file also shows several expensive upgrade requests originating from your email address, which were strictly denied by management because you were not financially authorized to make them. A loud murmur erupted from the dining room, where the doors had been left open. Several relatives were now standing up, craning their necks to listen. Aunt Clara whispered loudly, "Wait. I thought Sarah paid for everything?" Cousin Leo frowned. That's exactly what she told us. Sarah's head snapped toward them, her face turning a violent shade of crimson. I coordinated everything. Chloe is just trying to ruin Mom's night because she's jealous. My mother walked out, looking completely disoriented, as if the marble floor of the lobby had just turned into water. Chloe, please, just come back inside, she pleaded, her voice shaking. We can discuss this privately. Don't make a scene. You were perfectly comfortable letting Sarah humiliate me publicly, Mom, I replied, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet lobby. Why should the truth require privacy? That was the exact moment my grandpa Arthur, a retired forensic accountant who had been quietly observing the entire evening, slowly stood up from the table. He removed his reading glasses, folded them neatly, and walked toward the lobby doors. His silence was nothing like my father's passive avoidance. Grandpa Arthur's silence was calculating. He had been watching, measuring, and remembering. Before anyone asks Chloe for another damn thing, Grandpa Arthur said, his voice booming with startling authority, Sarah needs to explain exactly why she collected money from several of us for a dinner that Chloe had already paid for. Zara froze. I froze too. I had known she was stealing the credit. I had absolutely no idea she was stealing money. Grandpa Arthur reached into his suit jacket, pulled out his smartphone, and placed it directly on top of the black leather bill folio in Sarah's hands. On the bright screen was a Venmo request from Sarah. It read, "Send me your share by Friday. I'm covering the main party, but every little bit helps make Mom's night perfect." Directly below the message was a completed transfer receipt showing Grandpa Arthur had sent her $600. Aunt Clara gasped and immediately pulled out her own phone. I sent her $400 on Tuesday, she announced. Cousin Leo checked his app. I sent $300. Within 30 seconds, 4 different relatives confirmed they had sent Sarah payments totaling over $2,000. $500. The entire room shifted. Nobody was looking at me anymore, every single eye in the lobby was locked onto Sarah. Update 1. Sarah stared at the Venmo receipts glowing on the phones around her as if they were venomous snakes. She started stammering, her previous arrogance completely evaporating into sheer panic. That money was for the extras. She blurted out, her voice cracking. It was for the flowers. And the transportation. And the gratuity. Things Chloe probably forgot to handle because she's so cheap. Marcus, who deserved a medal for his composure, simply turned his tablet so the nearest relatives could clearly see the itemized contract. For the record, Marcus stated clearly, the private luxury transportation was paid directly in cash by Chloe Watson 2 weeks ago. The custom floral invoice is already included in the venue total you see here. A mandatory 20% gratuity is also fully included in the outstanding balance. There are no unpaid extras. Aunt Clara crossed her arms, glaring at Sarah. So where exactly did my $400 go, Sarah? Cousin Leo stepped forward. Yeah, and my $300? Sarah's excuses began violently colliding with each other. First, she claimed the money was still sitting untouched in her checking account. Then, in the very next breath, she claimed she had already spent it on a secret surprise gift for Mom that hadn't arrived yet. Finally, she burst into tears and insisted everyone had simply misunderstood her initial message. Grandpa Arthur raised one hand, and the interrogation stopped. There is absolutely nothing unclear about the phrase, "Send me your share, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with disgust. You intentionally allowed this family to believe you financed this evening. You viciously insulted the sister who actually did. And you secretly collected thousands of dollars on top of it. You are a fraud. Sarah turned toward me, her face twisted in desperation. Chloe set this up. She knew exactly how this would look. She planned this to ruin my reputation. I almost admired the sheer audacity it took to try and spin my boundaries into her conspiracy. I had no idea about the Venmo transfers, Sarah, I said coldly. But I do know you called the hotel yesterday and lied, claiming you were financially authorized to add charges to my card. Marcus nodded in agreement. Actually, there is one more matter. He tapped his tablet, opening a forwarded email chain, and began to read aloud. Subject line, birthday presentation revision, sent by Sarah Watson at 2:15 p.m. yesterday. Marcus cleared his throat and read Sarah's exact words. Marcus, please change the custom cake plaque to read. With love from Sarah and the family. Also, please instruct the photography team to ensure I am positioned directly to Helen's right in all formal portraits. Lastly, please instruct the waitstaff not to mention Chloe's name during the champagne toast. Chloe prefers to stay out of the spotlight and gets anxious when acknowledged. I felt something deep inside my chest go completely still. Sarah had not simply accepted mistaken praise. She had meticulously, intentionally designed my erasure. She had plotted to write me out of my own mother's memory. Mom read the email on the tablet, her hands shaking. She looked at Sarah. You told me Chloe didn't want to be involved at all, she whispered. You told me she couldn't be bothered to help. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish, but no sound came out. Mom turned to me, tears spilling over her eyelashes. Is that why you didn't give the birthday speech? Sarah told me you wanted her to do it, I replied, my voice hollow. She told me you thought I made family events too much about myself, and that you specifically asked for me not to speak. Mom's face tightened in absolute horror. Dad finally stepped forward, no longer able to hide behind his passive silence. He looked at Sarah, his jaw clenched. Pay the bill, Sarah. The absolute directness of his voice shocked everyone. Dad never raised his voice. Sarah let out a single, brittle laugh. With what, Dad? I don't have $8,700. I didn't agree to this. Neither did the relatives who sent you money under entirely false pretenses, Grandpa Arthur replied sharply. Yet you happily accepted theirs. Pay the restaurant. Shaking uncontrollably, Sarah pulled a gold-colored credit card from her designer purse and handed it to Marcus with a dramatic flourish, clearly trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Fine. Charge it. Then everyone can stop acting like I committed some unforgivable war crime. Marcus took the card to the terminal at the front desk. The entire lobby waited in agonizing silence. The machine let out a loud, harsh times beep. Marcus tried it again. Another times beep. He walked back over and handed the card back to Sarah. I'm sorry, ma'am. The transaction has been declined for insufficient funds. Sarah's face went from pale gray to stark white. Frantically, she dug into her purse and produced a second card. Marcus ran it. Declined again. No one laughed. The silence in the lobby was so heavy it was suffocating. It was worse than mockery. In less than 10 minutes, the flawless, successful, generous image Sarah had spent a decade polishing had been completely stripped away, revealing the broke, manipulative liar underneath. Mom looked devastated, but for the very first time in my life, she did not rush forward to protect Sarah. You looked me in the eye and told me you paid for this beautiful venue, Mom choked out. You sat there and let me thank you in front of our entire family, knowing Chloe did everything. Sarah's eyes filled with angry tears. And she pointed a shaking finger at me. I was going to make it work. Chloe always has money. She enjoys throwing it around and rescuing everyone. She's just rubbing it in our faces. That sentence single-handedly destroyed whatever tiny fraction of sympathy remained in the room. I stepped closer to her, not to rescue her, but because I wanted her to hear me perfectly. I did enjoy helping, Sarah, I said quietly. What I did not enjoy was being erased from existence while you spent my hard-earned money as evidence of your own generosity. Ownership comes with a price. Enjoy the bill. I turned around, walked out the front doors, handed my ticket to the valet, and drove away. I later learned from Cousin Leo exactly how the night ended. Grandpa Arthur instructed Marcus to separate the charges. Dad was forced to put $4,000 on his credit card. Mom had to transfer $2,000 from her emergency savings account. Several relatives applied their earlier Venmo contributions to the bill, but only after forcing Sarah to transfer the funds back to them right there in the lobby while they watched her scream. Sarah had to formally borrow the final $1,500 from Dad, who made her sign a literal napkin promising to repay it monthly with interest. The dinner continued only because the kitchen had already prepared the food, but the celebration was completely dead. No one asked Sarah to make a toast. The photographer quietly threw away Sarah's demanded shot list. And when the cake was finally brought out, the plaque had been swapped back to the original one I ordered, Happy 60th, Mom and a ZH. By the time I reached my apartment, I had 42 unread messages. Dad wrote, "Your mother hasn't stopped crying." Sarah wrote, "You are a psycho. You humiliated me on purpose to make yourself look like a saint." Mom called me 6 times, finally leaving a weeping voicemail begging me to come back to the hotel so we could end the night as a family and forgive each other. The wording would have been hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. Even after everything, they still fundamentally believed that peace was something I was supposed to manufacture by swallowing the truth and absorbing Sarah's abuse. I turned my phone on silent, took a long, hot shower, and slept better than I had in 5 years. The next morning, the family group chat was a war zone. Sarah had posted a massive, 6-paragraph essay claiming she had collected the Venmo contributions because she fully intended to reimburse me later, and that I had ambushed her before she had the chance. Grandpa Arthur replied with a single sentence. Then post the screenshot of the scheduled transfer you plan to send Chloe. Sarah did not reply. On Monday afternoon, the receptionist at my architecture firm called my desk to tell me my sister was in the lobby. I went downstairs immediately, refusing to let her near my colleagues. Sarah was standing near the elevators wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a white envelope. She shoved it toward my chest. "There," she snapped. "It's a cashier's check for $2,500. The exact amount of the deposit you lost. Now we're even. Call off the family." I didn't even look inside the envelope. I handed it right back to her. "We are nowhere near even, Sarah. The money was always the easiest part of this." She ripped off her sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot, but her rage was fully intact. "What else do you possibly want, Chloe? A public execution? You already ruined my life." "I want a public correction," I said calmly. "I want you to post in the family group chat that I planned and funded the entire dinner. I want you to admit you collected money while claiming you were paying. I want you to reimburse Dad for every cent he covered, and I want you to never, ever speak for me again." She stared at me as though I had just asked her to cut off her own arm. "You want me to completely destroy my reputation?" "No," I replied. "I want you to stop using my reputation to protect yours." Sarah lowered her voice, leaning in with a vicious sneer. "Mom will never forgive you for tearing this family apart." That was the moment I realized she hadn't come to apologize. She had come to negotiate a return to the status quo. She wanted to pay a $2,500 penalty fee to buy back her golden child status, blame me for the conflict, and move on without changing a single thing about her behavior. I stepped back, letting the envelope fall from her hand onto the lobby floor. Then Mom can make her own choice. I turned and walked back to the elevators. Update 2. 2 days later, Mom called and practically begged me to attend a family meeting at my parents' house. I agreed under one strict condition. Nobody was allowed to ask me to apologize for leaving the dinner. When I arrived, Grandpa Arthur was already sitting at the dining room table, a thick manila folder resting in front of him. Dad sat beside Mom, looking like he had aged a decade in a week. Sarah sat across from me, her arms tightly crossed, glaring at the wall. Mom immediately launched into her usual, rehearsed speech about how sisters have misunderstandings and how one painful night shouldn't erase a lifetime of family love. I let her speak for 3 minutes before I cut her off. "Mom, I tried handling things privately for 10 years. Every single time Sarah took credit for my work, insulted me, or rewrote history, you told me to let it go. Privacy didn't solve the problem. Privacy protected her." Dad looked down at his hands. Mom started to instinctively defend Sarah, but Grandpa Arthur slammed his hand on the table. He opened his manila folder. Inside were 23 pages of printed documents. Arthur, bless his forensic accountant heart, had spent the last 3 days conducting a full investigation. He had printed copies of the venue emails, the Venmo transfer logs, and several years' worth of older family group chats. He pulled out a printed Facebook post from my college graduation, where Sarah had claimed she paid for my celebratory dinner. Arthur had the credit card statement proving I had paid for it myself from my waitressing job. He pulled out another chat log from a family trip to Mexico 2 years ago. Sarah had claimed I canceled at the last minute because I was flaky. Arthur had printed the text messages proving Sarah had intentionally given me the wrong departure date, causing me to miss the flight, so she could steal my first-class upgrade. Arthur had called multiple extended family members and asked them for examples. The pattern of theft, manipulation, and gaslighting filled 23 solid pages. Sarah's face morphed from defiant anger to sheer, unadulterated terror as each page was turned and read aloud. This was no longer just one messy dinner she could dismiss as a misunderstanding. It was a documented history of emotional and financial abuse. Dad finally looked up, his eyes full of tears. "I knew some of this was happening," he admitted, his voice cracking. "Not the money. But the way she treated you." I stayed quiet because every time I tried to correct her, the fighting became so exhausting. I just wanted peace. I looked at my father, feeling a profound sense of pity and anger. "Your silence was a decision, Dad. It didn't create peace. It just made Sarah's life easier, and my life a living hell." Dad nodded slowly, burying his face in his hands. Mom began to sob, reaching out for me. For the first time in my life, I did not move from my chair to comfort her. That was another role I had performed automatically, and I was officially resigning. Sarah looked around the table, realizing she had 0 allies left. "So, what happens now?" she asked bitterly. Grandpa Arthur answered before anyone else could. "You repay every single cent you owe to your father and your relatives. You post a full, honest correction in the family group chat. And until trust is entirely rebuilt, you are permanently banned from managing any family money, reservations, group gifts, or events. You are stripped of your title." Mom looked startled by the severity. Sarah looked absolutely furious. For years, organizing family occasions and being the center of attention had been her throne. Losing that power hurt her significantly more than the declined credit cards. Dad looked at Arthur and said, "I agree." Then Mom, after a long, agonizing silence, wiped her eyes and whispered, "I agree, too." Sarah stared at me, waiting for me to intervene, to soften the blow, to rescue her like I always did. I just looked back at her, my face completely blank. Revenge, I realized in that moment, was not the moment her credit card declined at the hotel. True revenge was the moment my parents finally stopped asking me to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. Sarah waited 4 days before posting the correction. Her first attempt was a masterclass in passive-aggressive PR. She wrote that emotions had been high, that communication had failed, and that certain unfair assumptions had been made about the party. Grandpa Arthur immediately replied in the chat, "Try again, Sarah. Tell the truth, or I will post the 2-3-page PDF." She deleted the post 3 minutes later. Her second version was completely different. It was short, brutal, and honest. Chloe planned the entire dinner, paid the deposit, authorized the reservation, selected the menu, and paid for the transportation. I falsely allowed everyone to believe I was the host. I secretly collected Venmo contributions without telling her, and I used her silence to make myself look generous. What I said to her at the table was cruel and untrue. "I am returning all the money and repaying Dad. I am sorry." I read it twice, sitting on my couch, waiting for the familiar, nagging urge to text her and reassure her that everything was okay. The urge never came. The relatives responded with incredibly restrained messages. Nobody attacked her, but nobody rushed in to coddle her or erase the consequences, either. Aunt Clara simply replied, "Thank you for the truth. I expect my $400 by Friday." Cousin Leo texted, "I need some space from you for a while." Sarah. Mom officially removed Sarah from the joint family bank account she had used for emergencies and handed the financial records over to an outside bookkeeper. The punishment wasn't explosive or dramatic, but it was absolute. Sarah had completely lost control of the narrative, the money, and the untouchable role she had abused for a decade. A week later, Mom came to my apartment alone. She was holding a small bakery box. Inside was the midnight blue and silver birthday cake topper that Marcus had saved for me after the dinner. She set it gently on my kitchen island and looked at me. "I owe you a massive apology, Chloe," she said, her voice trembling. "And I am not going to ask you to make me feel better about it." That was the first truly promising sentence my mother had spoken to me in years. She sat on my bar stool and admitted that she had heavily favored Sarah because Sarah constantly demanded attention and created crises, while I always seemed so capable, independent, and quiet. "You made confidence and success look so easy," Mom cried. I selfishly treated your independence as permission to give you less love. I am so deeply sorry. I handed her a tissue, but I didn't hug her, and I didn't tell her everything was fine. Confidence isn't the absence of needing a mother, Mom, I said softly. I needed you to defend me. I needed you to ask just one question before believing Sarah's lies. I needed you not to smile into your wine glass while I was being publicly humiliated. Mom wept, nodding in understanding. We agreed to start meeting once a week for coffee, just the two of us, with a strict rule: we were not allowed to discuss Sarah. Dad called me later that night. He apologized deeply for treating his avoidance as neutrality. I told him exactly what I told him at the hotel: silence always chooses a side, and it's always the side of the abuser. He told me he was looking into a therapist for himself and Mom, which meant more to me than 1,000 apologies. Sarah did not contact me for nearly a month. During that time of silence, I received a forwarded email from Marcus at the hotel. He had found a final document in the event file that I had never seen. The drafted speech Sarah had planned to give before I walked out. I read it, my blood running cold. In the speech, Sarah planned to thank Mom for teaching her that the people who truly contribute to a family never need recognition, and then she planned to explicitly announce that she had personally saved the party at the last minute after Chloe became too selfishly obsessed with her new promotion to help. The cruelty wasn't just spontaneous. It was deliberate, rehearsed, and scheduled to be delivered right before we ate the cake I paid for. I forwarded the document to Grandpa Arthur, Mom, and Dad without a single word of commentary attached. I didn't hear the fallout, but I learned later that Mom immediately canceled a planned weekend spa trip with Sarah and told her they would not be resuming their usual closeness until Sarah sought intense professional help. That was the loss Sarah had feared the most. She was no longer the protected, flawless daughter. When Sarah finally asked to meet me, we chose a very public, brightly lit cafe. She arrived looking exhausted. No designer sunglasses. No fake designer bags. No arrogant smirk. I reread the toast I sent the hotel, she said quietly, staring into her coffee. I don't even recognize the person who wrote that. I do, I replied flatly. I've been forced to know her for my entire life. She winced, but she didn't argue. She finally admitted the truth. My recent promotion to senior architect had triggered a massive inferiority complex in her. She was drowning in credit card debt, her influencer career was a complete sham, and she had built her entire identity around being the impressive, successful older sister. Instead of admitting I was failing and terrified, I tried to destroy you, she whispered, tears hitting the table. I thought if I could convince everyone you were a selfish, cheap workaholic, I would still look valuable by comparison. I looked at her for a long time. Are you actually sorry for hurting me, Sarah? Or are you just sorry your plan failed and you got caught? She took a long, shuddering breath. Both, she admitted. It wasn't a perfect, cinematic apology. But for the first time in 31 years, it was honest. I told her I was not ready to forgive her, and that I might never fully trust her with my money, my reputation, or my heart ever again. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What can I do? Change when nobody is watching, I said, standing up from the table. And stop expecting access to me as your reward for doing the bare minimum. We left the cafe separately. There was no dramatic hug, no instant healing, no swelling music. And that made it feel infinitely more real than any fake family promise we had made before. 6 months have passed since the birthday dinner. Last week, Mom invited me to a small family dinner at the exact same hotel. My first instinct was to immediately refuse. But then she forwarded me the reservation confirmation, the fully paid receipt, on Dad's card, and a guest list with absolutely no surprises. You do not need to organize anything, pay for anything, or manage anyone, her text read. You only need to decide whether you want to come. That distinction mattered to me. I accepted. When I arrived, Sarah was already seated. She had not touched the place cards. She hadn't rearranged the centerpieces. There was no photographer to boss around. The dinner was simple, fully paid for, and intentionally ordinary. Grandpa Arthur sat at the head of the table, watching everyone with the faint, satisfied smile of a man who knew that genuine progress was far less flashy than performance, but infinitely more valuable. Sarah greeted me politely. She didn't attempt a dramatic, performative apology. Over the previous 6 months, she had managed to repay every single relative and had completed 5 monthly payments to Dad. She had completely stopped trying to manage family events, deleted her fake influencer Instagram account, and had finally started meeting with a cognitive behavioral therapist. I only knew these things because Mom occasionally mentioned them in passing, not because Sarah used them to bargain for my forgiveness. That difference mattered. 2. During the main course, a heavy porcelain serving dish of roasted vegetables was placed directly between Sarah and me. For one suspended, terrifying second, the memory flashed in my mind: her manicured finger tapping the silver spoon, her mocking voice telling me not to fill my plate, the suffocating silence of the table. Sarah clearly remembered it, too. She looked at the dish, then looked at me. Very carefully, she picked up the serving dish, moved it toward me, and said softly, "You first, Chloe." It was a tiny, insignificant gesture to anyone else. I didn't mistake it for a magical transformation. But I accepted it. I took the spoon, and I filled my plate without a single ounce of apology. Later, Mom stood up to make a toast. She thanked Dad for organizing the dinner, thanked Grandpa Arthur for insisting on honesty, and thanked Sarah for taking real accountability. Then, she turned to me. "I used to praise Chloe for being so strong," Mom said, her voice wavering with emotion. "But what I really meant was that I expected her to survive without my support. I was wrong. Her generosity was never an obligation, and her boundaries are not a punishment. I am so proud of the woman you are, Chloe." The room remained quiet, but this time, the silence did not erase me. It made space for the truth. Mom didn't ask me to respond or perform forgiveness. She simply raised her glass, and we drank. The family has never returned to the old version of normal. Sarah is no longer treated as the automatic leader. Dad no longer disappears into his wine glass when conversations become uncomfortable. Mom strictly checks facts before defending anyone. And me? I stopped funding celebrations to buy affection. I stopped accepting cruel insults disguised as jokes. And I stopped explaining my boundaries to people who were committed to misunderstanding them. The night Sarah told me not to eat because I supposedly hadn't contributed a penny, she expected me to scramble to defend the cost of my plate. Instead, I stopped paying for the entire illusion. The $11,200 bill exposed her lies, but the real consequence was so much larger. She permanently lost the protection that had allowed those lies to thrive. I didn't get revenge by ruining her life. I got revenge by refusing to let her build her life on my silence anymore. Every time I remember walking out of those glass doors in my green coat, I no longer think about the $2,500 deposit I lost. I think about the part of my soul I finally stopped giving away. My family was too broke for my birthday while my sister got a lavish party, but when a college honored me, they suddenly came crawling back. I'm William Carter, the oldest child. 24-year-old certified welder who is the first in his family to complete a vocational program. You'd think that would elicit a nod or a group embrace. Nope. When I passed my certification exam, my mother texted me. "Oh, that is cool. Please let us know if you need a new lunchbox." Smiling face with smiling eyes. They assumed I was still the child who failed to RSVP to his own prom, not the guy who could design a structural beam in under 30 seconds. My sister Lily might receive applause for sneezing. 2 years younger, 4 shades blonder, and endowed with the type of star student energy that my parents breathed like secondhand smoke. Growing up, she had a whole shelf of participation awards. I had a drawer full of receipts for part-time jobs, groceries, gas, and steel-toed boots. She took dance instruction. By the age of 15, I had a mop and was working on Sundays at Smiley's car wash. It was not jealousy. It was erosion. One missed moment at a time. When my 18th birthday rolled around, my mother announced, "We're skipping gifts this year, budgeting's tight." But 2 months later, Lily had a full-fledged Sweet 16 party with a chocolate fountain and a bounce house. A bouncy house. I didn't inform them when I passed my welding certification at 16, following 3 years of night classes and double shifts. I just grabbed myself a burger and fries, sat in the work van, and let the silence suffice. At least Ratchet, my rescued mutt, wagged his tail as if I had won the lotto. So, when Lily's college graduation rolled around, I didn't anticipate a big deal. I wasn't even expecting a medium bargain. However, what I witnessed was a 5-act play with food. Dylan, our relative with a constantly backward cap and a podcast that nobody listens to, shared a slideshow on Instagram. The subtitles read like a press release. "Lily made it. We are so proud of our valedictorian queen." There they all were. Mom, Dad, Aunt Linda, Uncle Peter, and even Great Aunt Ruth, whose last reported movement was in 2014. They were all clinking glasses in the garden, with matching t-shirts, monogrammed napkins, and a cake taller than my apartment's fridge. I blinked, scrolled, and waited. Mom finally sent me a text. "We will celebrate yours later, Red Art. I'm really proud of you." Number when? No telephone call. Just the classic later that never comes. I glanced at my cracked phone screen, sitting alone in my studio apartment above a hardware store. Ratchet snoozing next to me like a gremlin in a dog bed. The spaghetti I microwaved had become cold. I did not want the glitter or the cake. I wanted to be seen. The next morning, I pulled on my grease-stained boots, threw a breakfast burrito in my face, and left for work. We were short a worker, so I worked the entire shift on the industrial pipe job, welding through heat and metal fumes. It was exhausting but made sense. Unlike family. 3 weeks have passed. There was no word, No follow-up. No, hey, let's celebrate now. Not even a, how's work? From anyone. It was as if I had developed an allergy to group conversations. Dylan appeared unexpectedly at my workplace. He didn't text or call, he simply drove up in his beat-up Toyota, sunglasses on, as if he were filming a documentary. I was piling metal rods into the truck bed when he approached and said, "Dude, you're not going to believe what I just got asked." I wiped sweat from my brow and gave him the same expression I give failing soldering equipment. "This should not be about a podcast episode." He grinned. "Nope, it's about you." And that's when it all began. I squinted at Dylan as if the sun itself were suspicious. "You're saying someone asked you to talk to me?" "Technically, they asked if you'd be available," Dylan explained, raising his brow as if it made a difference. "But yeah." I folded my arms and leaned on the truck's bed. My shirt was half saturated with sweat. Ratchet, who I occasionally bring to work, glanced up from the shade under the trailer, as if he too was braced for disappointment. "Okay, spit it out. Am I being drafted or kidnapped?" Dylan appeared overly enthusiastic about someone delivering a message. "So, this guy I know, Victor," he said. "He is on the board of the technical college downtown. They're doing this new trades campaign, build the future or something like that, and they're looking for people to feature, like real grads who came up through the grind, not some guy holding a clipboard in a suit pretending to know what a rivet gun is." I blinked. "And you give them my name?" "Well, I showed them your Instagram video, where you were replacing that broken water line in the rain. You resembled a welding god." "That wasn't rain," I mumbled. "It was a burst pipe, and I had bronchitis for a week after." "Exactly. Real grit. They loved it. They want to meet you. Said your story is authentic. They're tired of showing white collars holding blueprints. They want the guy who actually does it." I stared at him, then slowly looked over my shoulder, as if there was another William behind me. One that mattered more. I said, "Wait." With a dry voice. "Let me guess. They're offering me exposure, right? Maybe a pizza coupon." Dylan cracked a joke. "No, dude. There's a stipend. Like $2,000. Plus, they'll feature you on all the college's ads, posters online, maybe even a billboard if they raise the budget." I hadn't noticed, my inner monologue quickly joined in. They want to put my name out there, literally and publicly, which, ironically, was something my own family never did. I glanced down at my grease-stained boots. The tools clinked behind me as the other guys loaded up. The idea seemed absurd. Me. A walking afterthought at every holiday dinner. Being asked to represent something. "What's the catch?" I inquired, half laughing, half serious. "No catch. They just want to meet you first. See if you're comfortable on camera. You just share your story. Maybe do some shots of you welding. Talking about your journey. Show people that not every success story wears a tie." I didn't respond promptly. Instead, I reached for my thermos, took a long drink of lukewarm coffee, and reflected about my graduation. I just stood there alone in a half-empty auditorium, holding my rolled-up certificate. No one applauded or cheered my name. And now some strangers want to place me on a billboard. I cleared my throat. "Fine," I said. "I'll go to the meeting. But if this turns out to be a pyramid scheme for selling toolboxes to grandmothers, I'll weld your door shut." Dylan smiled as if he had just pulled off a magic act. "Deal. And believe me, this is going to be massive." The meeting was held 2 days later at the community college's main building. I'd never been there before. My welding program was located across town in a renovated warehouse that smelled of rust, perspiration, and accomplishment. This place had espresso machines and potted plants. Dylan had to counsel me on not showing up in my work boots. I wore pants and the nicest polo I possessed, which still had a fading bleach mark at the sleeve. I entered that meeting room feeling like a construction worker at a yacht club. But they greeted me as if I were a headline speaker. The campaign coordinator, Naomi, posed thoughtful questions. Victor, the board member, had already learned half of my tale via Dylan. They inquired about my shifts, training, and what I wish people knew about trade labor, and I did not sugarcoat anything. I told them about working late, choosing tools over textbooks, and seeing my sister receive standing ovations for honors I had no idea existed as I patched up rusted plumbing in a basement that smelled like damp carpet and regret. They listened. When I finished, Naomi smiled and added, "We'd be honored to feature you." That night I sat in my apartment with Ratchet curled up next to me. I gazed at the email they sent, confirming the campaign timeline. One statement stood out. We'll reveal the campaign at the summer commencement ceremony. My stomach flipped. Summer has begun. The same one that my cousin Dylan was attending. My family planned to attend the same ceremony again for someone else. But this time, it was not about them. It was about me. I almost backed out on the first day of filming. I arrived with oil still under my fingernails. Naomi assured me that was great realism, carrying a clipboard as the cameraman set up beside a stack of steel beams. They recorded me welding, sweating, grinding through sparks, and talking about things I'd never expressed aloud. For example, I used to sneak back into the house after 3 a.m. In high school, I worked janitorial shifts, stepping over loose floors to avoid waking up anyone. Or how my father once told a family dinner that I was taking a gap year while I was actually working 60 hours a week moving timber on a construction site. The crew didn't interrupt, no phony tears, just nodding and listening. Naomi also had me conduct a sit-down interview. There was no rehearsing, no script, simply questions like, "What kept you going?" And, "What do you wish people knew about this path?" I answered honestly. I wanted to be useful. Even if no one applauded, it was necessary. The camera did not wink, neither did Naomi. Then came the question that threw me off guard. "Do your family know you're part of this campaign?" I choked back tears. "Not really," I replied. "They know I work, but not that I'm proud of it." She smiled softly and scrawled something down. "They will." Over the next week, they recorded more of my workshop, the worn boots outside my entrance, and Ratchet wagging his tail like a four-legged mascot. They even captured a time-lapse of me erecting a unique metal railing that I created from scratch. It all felt less like a production, and more like a peculiar form of therapy, as if I had been hushed in lowercase letters my entire life. And now, I'm being written in bold. But I didn't tell anyone. Nor my mother, nor my father, and not Lily. Especially not Lily. I didn't hide it out of spite. Not precisely. I just didn't want to give them the opportunity to downplay it, which they would. If I told them I was going to be featured at a commencement ceremony, they'd probably think, "Oh, how nice for a trade thing." If I mentioned the billboard, the response would be, "Really? You're not joking." So I didn't say anything. Allow them to celebrate Dylan's graduation as if it were another family coronation. Allow them to pose in their pastel clothes and share captions regarding legacy and future leaders. Meanwhile, I continued to show up to work, taking Naomi's calls, approving headshots, checking quotes, and witnessing my name transition. From an email subject line to a flyer mock-up to a full banner design. Naomi called one afternoon to check the final details. "We'll reveal the new Build the Future campaign at the opening of the commencement ceremony. Your face will be on the main screen during the intro along with your quote." I took a break. "What quote?" she said, laughing. "The one you gave us. The thing about wanting to be useful, even if nobody clapped. It hit hard in editing. You'll see." Mom sent me a group text the night before the ceremony. "I'm excited for Dylan's big day tomorrow. Everyone remembers to wear blue, with a cheerful face and eyes." I stared at it for a time. Blue, the same color I wore when I moved out, when I skipped my own graduation and ate drive-through tacos in the parking lot. I considered simply answering, "See you there," but I didn't. Not yet. I simply smiled, turned off my phone, lay out my cleanest pants, polished my boots, and printed the email Naomi supplied with my official badge and parking pass. This time, I was not sneaking in. This time, I received an invitation. The morning of the event, I arrived early. It's too early. The auditorium lobby smelled like cheap cologne and new diploma covers. Staff were still pasting signs on folding tables, organizing name tags, and testing microphones. Naomi waved at me and handed me a badge with my name on it. Only my name. Not Lily's brother. Not +1. Simply William Carter in bold. "Are you ready?" she said. "Born ready?" I inquired, before panicking and adding, "I mean sure." She laughed and handed me a tiny envelope. "After your feature plays, we'll bring you backstage. The dean wants to give you a quick thank you. They're adding your quote to the college website." I didn't see it. "What? Like permanently?" "Yep," she commented. "With your face next to it." I slid the envelope into my jacket pocket as if it were made of glass. Around 9:45 a.m., people began to arrive, including parents dressed in suits and friends clutching bouquets. Every fourth individual carried balloons. I located a seat at the back. Not concealed, but quiet. Naomi informed me they'd be featuring me after the video anyhow, so I might as well enjoy the show. At 10:02, I spotted them. My family. Mom dressed in her regular modest church glam gown, complete with pearls. Dad wore a blazer that I hadn't seen since his unsuccessful HOA campaign. And Lily, her hair flawlessly curled, held an iced latte as if it were a part of her hand. They did not see me. Not that they were looking. They took seats closer to the front, 2 rows behind the graduates. Dylan stood close, taking selfies as if he were going to perform at Coachella. He pointed to the large Welcome Graduates banner and muttered something that made Lily laugh so hard she tilted her cup. I just watched. And maybe for a brief minute, I felt the familiar pit in my gut. The one who murmured, "This isn't your crowd. This isn't your day." The lights dimmed, and everything changed. A spotlight illuminated the stage. The announcer, a faculty member with a voice suitable for morning radio, welcomed everyone to the summer commencement ceremony. As we honor this year's graduates, we'd like to spotlight the stories that don't usually make the front page. The modest accomplishments, the unsung builders, the hands that literally shape our world. My spine straightened. Today, the narrator continued, we launch our new campaign, Build the Future, featuring someone who reminds us what determination looks like, even when nobody's watching. The screen flashed, music played, and then my face emerged. Not a selfie. Not a grainy phone photo. A clear cinematic shot of me welding in slow motion, sparks flying, my eyes hidden behind the mask. My quote below. I just wanted to be useful, even if no one clapped. There was silence in the room. Then more clips. Time-lapse video showing me constructing the railing, mending a burst pipe in the rain, and lifting a welding mask with sweat on my brow. It cut to an interview tape of me talking about working night jobs in high school and how trade school was not a backup plan, but rather the plan. The video concluded with the campaign's tagline, Build the future in every way that matters. When the lights came back on, there was a moment of silence before applauding. Big, genuine and loud applause. People began turning. A staff member went forward and asked, William Carter, could you please stand? I stood, anxieties kicking like mule in my chest, but I stood. My cousin Dylan's mouth literally dropped open. I saw it from across the auditorium. My father leaned in toward my mother, apparently muttering something with a frown. Lily stared at me as if I were some stranger who had photobombed her graduation party. The applause continued going. People who had never met me applauded. My own relatives simply stared. Naomi smirked as I moved into the backstage hallway. Your family didn't know? Nope, I told them. Damn, she said quietly, almost proud. That's one hell of a reveal. Backstage smelt like coffee, fresh paper, and a faint hint of tense sweat. I followed Naomi down a narrow hallway crowded with event staff. Someone gave me a thumbs up. Another brought me a bottle of water with a wink, as if I'd won something. I don't think I'd ever received that many congratulations in a single minute before. We entered a side room, and the dean, a tall, silver-haired guy with a voice like smooth gravel, shook my hand as if I had just returned from battle. William Carter, he said kindly. It's an honor to meet the face of our future. I wanted to contradict him and say I was just a welder who happened to be in front of a TV crew, but instead I nodded, smiled and said, Thanks. This means a lot. He handed me a printed version of the campaign poster, with my quotation and name placed under the headline. We'll be putting this up in the main hallway for the fall semester, he told me. You've already had students asking about the welding program. I hadn't noticed. Seriously? He asked, smiling. Your story is important. Never forget that. 15 minutes later, I sneaked back into the lobby. The ceremony was still going on, with alphabetical names called out in waves, but the hallway was packed with early exiters, bored siblings, and caffeine-deprived parents. Lily stood near the exit, like a glitch in the Matrix. Alone. I'm holding a mostly empty iced latte, and glancing at a promotional poster attached to a display board. My poster. When I stopped a few steps away, she didn't glance up. Looks better in print, I commented. She turned slowly. For a little moment, her countenance remained unchanged. That poised, magazine cover calm she had always worn. Then it cracked slightly, allowing a question to emerge. You didn't tell anyone? Nope. She blinked. Why? I shrugged. I figured it was just a trade thing. Nothing worth toasting. Lily opened her mouth, then closed it. Her jaw flexed. She looked at the poster again. I didn't know you were doing stuff like this because you didn't ask. The remarks were honest, not spiteful, and it seemed to hit harder. I'd always thought you were, doing okay, she told me. I was. But this? You're practically on a screen in front of everyone. Yeah, weird, right? She exclaimed, taking a brief breath. Not quite a chuckle and not quite a sigh. Then without looking at me, she remarked, Mom looked like she saw a ghost. I'm surprised she didn't claim I photoshopped it. This actually made me giggle. Quiet. Almost guilty. We stood there for a second. Not as enemies. Not quite like siblings either. Just folks who grew up in the same house but never really shared a narrative. I didn't mean to make it a thing, I told you. You didn't, Lily answered. We did. I nodded. Anyway, she continued, it was cool. You looked like you. That was the most genuine compliment I had ever received from her. I wasn't even sure what to do with it. So I just muttered, thanks. As I began to walk by her, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. Mom and Dad were loitering near the vending machines, conversing, checking their phones, and staring up at the poster as if it had committed a personal offense. They didn't approach or wave, just stood there in their awkward little cluster. And for the first time in my life, their silence did not make me feel small. I felt solid. They may have approached me. They could have said, congratulations, or, we are proud of you, but they did not. I didn't need them to. I had something better now. Proof. And peace. By the time I came home, my phone resembled a punching bag employed by the notification gods. I had 38 unread texts, a dozen missed calls, and 3 Instagram tags from people I hadn't spoken with since high school gym class. I was expecting a few awkward, wow, you looked clean messages. Instead, I opened Naomi's direct message first. Videos live already, 9.2K views in the first hour, you brought it, fire. I followed the directions. There I was. Put your mask down. Welding torch in hand. Molten sparks flash across the screen like fireflies in a storm. The comments section provided more than just support. It was validation. My brother needed to hear this. This is what kids should see more of. He gets it. Real work. True tale. I do not even weld. And it hit hard. One even stated, I hope his family is proud, which made my soul laugh out loud. Then came the group chat tsunami. Family redart. 18 members, lighted up like a slot machine. Mom. Why didn't William tell us? We were very astonished. Dad. I just saw it. You seemed respectable. I didn't expect that level of polish. Lily. You're quite famous now, LOL. Can I say that I know you? Then came the flood of extended family members reacting as if they had just discovered Bigfoot in their garden. Uncle Peter. Wait, is that our William from the college video? Aunt Linda. You should have told us. We would have clapped more loudly. Cousin Megan said, oh my God, I cried. My co-workers also saw it, and of course Mom's pièce de résistance. We're planning a small dinner to celebrate you this weekend. Just family. Ah yes, just family. The same group that skipped my trade school graduation and live-streamed Lily's from the back of a rented party limo. Suddenly they were laying down the red carpet for some takeout pizza and guilt appetizers. Hard pass. I did not respond. Not right away. Instead I reshared the official campaign post Naomi had tagged me in, which included my quote and banner image. There's no caption, just a hammer and a flame. The likes started trickling in, then flowing, and finally overflowing. Old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, some of whom used to sneer at me for wearing work boots to school, were now reacting with fire and flex biceps emojis. One man I hardly knew DM'd, bro, I showed this to my dad. He said, you speak for all of us. Another person said, you made welding look noble. Then, humorously, I received a note from my old chemistry teacher. Oh, and I knew you would go far. Please let me know if you would want to come talk to my class. I almost responded, you once called me a distraction with a wrench. But I let it go. Growth or anything. That night Lily texted me separately. So, are you doing more of these? I responded simply, they asked me to appear on a panel next semester. After a few minutes, she said, that's actually amazing. I believe you found your thing. Then, it's crazy. We hadn't even realized. Didn't you realize? No, they did not. Because they never asked. They were too busy applauding for caps and gowns to notice the guy wearing welding gloves and working night shifts. Mom messaged again before bed. Don't forget, we're planning Sunday dinner for your big day. Please let us know if that works. It's funny how a stranger's applause reminds people of your name and makes them want to host dinners. I stared at the message for a moment. Then I muted the chat. I had one more thing to complete before going to bed. I opened the marketing video again. I watched the line play and all I wanted was to be useful, even if no one clapped. Then I said to no one. Turns out they clap eventually after everyone else does first. I wasn't actually intending on attending the meal. But Sunday arrived and something inside me said, let them sit with it. Let them see you now. Not the packaged version. So I showed up. Clean jeans, a black button-up. Nothing flashy, just crisp enough to be unrecognizable to the version of myself that they used to mock. Ratchet stayed home. Even he did not deserve this kind of second-hand disgrace. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I saw was a sad little "Congratulations William" banner hanging over the porch light. It was obviously a remnant from Lily's celebration. Same typeface and colors. They just taped over her name. If you looked closely enough, you might see a faint B beneath the O classic. Inside, the living room smelled of store-bought lasagna and worry. The whole family was present. Mom, Dad, Lily, Uncle Peter, and even Aunt Linda, who hadn't spoken to me since she discovered me using the garage fridge as a child. They all smiled like performers who had just realized the director was sitting in the front row. Mom hugged me in what seemed like a job interview. William, look at you. Yes. I replied. I know. I cleaned it up. Dad patted me on the back. Big man on campus, huh? It wasn't a campus, I responded calmly. Just a stage. But close. We sat down at the table. Paper dishes, generic Coke, and a store-bought cake with "You did it" inscribed in red icing, as if someone had forgotten what it was. The discomfort was thick enough to spread on toast. Then Mom raised her glass, a single cup of sparkling cider. To William, she added cheerfully, for making us proud. We always knew he had it in him. Everyone grinned. Everyone but me. I took a sip of water and did not say anything. Because no, they did not always know. They did not applaud when I passed my certification exam. They did not upload images after I was hired full-time. They did not show up when I graduated from trade school with perfect attendance. Strangers were sharing my video, and academics were repeating my name, so they knew. As supper progressed, Linda attempted to strike up a conversation. So, do you think you'll be on more billboards? No idea, I replied. But I have 2 crews inquiring about contract work. Wow, she exclaimed, clearly surprised. Lily leaned in, saying, that's impressive. So, what do you actually do now? I asked, smiling slowly. Turns out I can make sparks fly. She rolled her eyes but did not answer. Toward the end of the lunch, Dad finally addressed the question he had plainly been storing for. So what's next for you, son? I wiped my mouth, laid my fork down, and responded, I've got meetings lined up for a local partnership, and I'm thinking about opening my own fabrication space by winter. Dead quiet. Mom blinked. Your own, what now? Shop, I replied. Business license, client list, custom work. You know, a real job. None of them laughed. Nobody breathed, so I pulled away from the table and stood up. I appreciate the effort, I murmured, indicating vaguely toward the cake. But I've got an early morning. Welding doesn't wait. I started to leave, but not before looking squarely at Mom. You know, I remarked with a smile. Lily's celebration featured a band. You might have at least recruited someone with a trumpet. I went away. Let's just say the look on their faces was more than worth a toast. I didn't hear anything from the family in the week after that supper. No follow-ups. No, so proud of you texts. The group discussion contained only a few awkward emoji reactions and one unconnected photo of Linda's new dog. But that Friday was when the time occurred. I was standing in the campus lobby, waiting to meet Naomi about the forthcoming panel, when Dylan strode in, camera bag slung over his shoulder, sunglasses on like he was ready for the press. We established eye contact. He stopped and, attempting to be casual, said, Hey man, big week, huh? Yeah, I replied. Guess so. You, really surprised people. I responded with a wink. You too? People didn't expect you to be so quiet. He chuckled nervously and murmured, Yeah, well, catch you later. He continued to go. I did not ask about the panel. Did not mention the video. But I knew he had seen it. They all did. Later that night I received a notification. Cousin Jason, who recorded part of the graduation on his phone, had uploaded a selfie on Instagram. I clicked without thinking. He was standing in front of the college's main hall. Behind him, the new campaign banner, Build the Future featuring William Carter, hung in large lettering. And immediately under the name was the quote, I just wanted to be useful, even if no one clapped. In the photo, I'm next to Jason. Not posed or intended. Just me, standing nearby. Hands in my pockets, staring at the banner, as if I still couldn't believe it was real. But Jason's caption sealed the deal. Didn't expect to see my name up there. No hashtags, no emojis, simply raw, unpleasant honesty. And that spoke louder than any toast could. Within an hour, others began sharing it. Friends, classmates, previous teachers, and a couple of my clients even submitted screenshots, asking if I was the guy in the banner. And the best part, I didn't post anything. I did not explain, I did not elucidate, I did not tag or humble brag. I simply let them see it, allow them to sit with it. Let them know that I didn't need a stage to be proud. I just needed some space to make my own. So I did. Quietly, fully, without requiring applause. They can toast all they want now. But I had already raised a glass to myself. I fought for my country, yet my parents betrayed me with an eviction threat. So I bought a house, exposed my sister, and became their landlord. This happened approximately 18 months ago, and I'm still understanding how completely nuclear things went. Buckle up, because this gets really wild, and the vengeance is beyond satisfying. Before we get started, a little bit about myself. I'm 26 years old, served in the Army as an infantryman for 4 years, and was sent twice to Afghanistan during some really tough periods. I returned to Colorado Springs to help my family get back on their feet while I sorted out my next career move. My father had been battling with reduced hours at his supervisory position at the local steel factory. Mom worked part-time in a pricey shop downtown. And my younger sister Kayla was searching for herself after dropping out of community college for the third time. Working construction during the day had me completely exhausted. Concrete workers performing commercial pours. Probably the most physically demanding profession you can imagine, yet it pays well at $28 per hour when overtime is factored in. Then I'd hurry across town to work midnight security shifts on this enormous tech campus 3 nights a week at $18 per hour. Between both jobs, I was earning around $4,200 per month before taxes, which isn't a lot, but it was good money, especially because I was living at home and was constantly helping with groceries and utilities without being asked. Or so I thought. That's how it worked. It was a Thursday night in March when my entire world turned upside down. I'd just gotten home from what could have been the most difficult 12-hour concrete pour of my whole career, and I was completely buried in dust and cement. My shoulders ached so much that I could barely lift my arms. All I wanted was a hot shower and some leftover pizza from the refrigerator. Instead, there was an official-looking letter laying on my dinner plate, similar to a court summons or eviction notice. Ethan Carter. Typed in full capital letters and properly centered on nice cream-colored paper. There was no return address, no personal handwriting, and no indication that this was from a family member. Dad was sitting opposite from me, looking through his phone and purposely avoiding eye contact. Mom was cleaning dishes with extreme attention and concentration, as if she was attempting to scrub the pattern off the plates. These should have served as big warning flags that something horrible was about to happen. I ripped open the envelope with my unclean hands and nearly choked on my water when I saw what was inside. Monthly housing agreement effective April 1, 2023. Monthly base rent, $1,200. Utilities and internet, $350. Food household contribution, $250. Total monthly payment, $1,800. Payment due date, 1st of each month. Late fee, $100 assessed after 5th day of month. At the very bottom, in bold letters, failure to comply with this agreement will result in 30-day eviction notice being served. I sat there staring at this contract for what felt like 10 minutes, trying to absorb what I was witnessing. My brain couldn't believe that my own parents had drafted an official rental agreement to charge me for residing in my childhood bedroom. What the heck is this supposed to be? I eventually managed to inquire. Dad eventually caught my gaze with a very serious businesslike attitude. It's time you started paying your fair share around here, son. You're 26 years old, with steady employment and regular income. My fair share? I asked, holding up the paper as if it were evidence in court. $1,800 per month for my childhood bedroom that still has Pokemon posters on the walls and a twin bed from middle school. The market rate for a private room in this area averages around $1,200 per month, Mom said, still aggressively scrubbing the same plate she'd been working on for 5 minutes straight, plus utilities, internet, and food contributions. We're actually giving you a significant family discount when you think about it. I gazed around the dining table, disbelieving and angry. So, where exactly is Kayla's official rental agreement? Did that somehow get lost in the mail or something? The room was completely silent. Kayla is going through a very important transitional period in her life right now, Dad responded deliberately, as if he had prepared this statement. She's working extremely hard on building her online business venture and establishing her brand. Her online business venture, right? What he really meant was that she was making insane sums of money on OnlyFans and Instagram, uploading explicit photographs and videos for lonely guys while living rent-free at our parents' property. I had personally witnessed the regular delivery of expensive shopping bags to our front door. She bought a brand new BMW with cash last month. The pricey professional ring lighting and camera equipment that had been permanently installed in her room, taking nearly half of the space. Meanwhile, I spend more than 60 hours every week, performing manual labor that is literally ruining my body joint by joint. And they want to charge me more than most people do for real one-bedroom flats in good complexes with pools and gyms. This is completely insane, I responded, doing my best to keep my voice calm and controlled. I've been helping with groceries, utilities, household expenses, basically everything around here without even being asked to contribute. That was voluntary assistance that you chose to provide, Mom said in a harsh businesslike tone that I had never heard her employ before. This is an official rental arrangement with clear terms and expectations. But Kayla doesn't contribute anything at all. She orders expensive food delivery every single day, uses more electricity than the rest of us combined with all her equipment, and I've never seen her buy groceries or pay for anything. Kayla's situation is completely different, Dad stated firmly. She's investing in her future and building something meaningful. That night, I laid in my twin bed, the same bed I'd been in since 7th grade, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand this complete betrayal by my own family. I had served my country honorably for 4 years. I've worked my tail off every day since returning home. Never requested handouts or preferential treatment. Always donated without being asked. And this is how my own parents chose to honor my loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication to assisting them. I opened my laptop and started a new Excel document called Financial Documentation, Carter Family Exploitation Analysis.xlsx. If they wanted to play hardball business games with their own kid and treat me like a tenant rather than a family member, I'd show them what proper strategic planning and paperwork looked like. The first month of paying that absurd extortion fee nearly broke me financially and emotionally. After taxes, the necessary $1,800 monthly payment, plus basic living expenditures such as petrol and auto insurance, I had about $600 left over for the rest of my life. I immediately began meal prepping nothing but rice and beans as if I were back in basic training, ceased hanging out with my army pals and old acquaintances, and took literally every extra shift available at both jobs. But here's something the military teaches you very well. Always gather comprehensive and accurate intelligence before making any tactical maneuvers against your opponent. So that is exactly what I began doing with fanatical precision. I began meticulously chronicling everything that happened in that house. Every single utility bill I could sneakily snap when no one was looking. Every shopping receipt from when I purchased food for the household. Kayla would purchase $80 worth of quality sushi delivery through DoorDash almost every day. Every Amazon shipment sent to her, sometimes 4 or 5 every day without exaggeration. What I uncovered during this rigorous examination caused my blood pressure to spike. Our house was a rather simple 1,400 square foot ranch-style property in a nice, but certainly not luxurious neighborhood. I spent many hours researching comparable rental homes online. In the same location, entire 2-bedroom apartments with swimming pools, fitness centers, and modern appliances cost between $1,400 and $1,600 per month. My own parents charged me $1,800 for a single bedroom with shared bathroom access, and no privacy at all. However, that was far from the most frustrating aspect of the issue. Because I work in construction, I am familiar with talented tradespeople in almost every industry. My coworker from the job site installs and repairs HVAC systems and has worked on several houses in our area in recent years. During our lunch break one day, I casually inquired about the average utility expenses for homes similar to ours. Electric should be running you maybe $150 to $200 maximum during peak summer months. Gas, probably around $100 during winter, he told me with a smile. Internet's probably another $80 to $90. Why are you asking about this stuff? I was meant to be paying $350 per month for electricity and internet in a little house that should have cost approximately $300 altogether. Then there was the entire food contribution trick they were pulling on me. I began keeping extremely comprehensive records of what I actually ingested versus what Kayla burned through on a regular basis. She ordered costly delivery food almost every day, premium Thai food, high-end sushi, fancy organic salad shops that charge $18 for lettuce and vegetables, and specialty coffee beverages that cost more than my entire lunch budget. The groceries that I had purchased for the household would vanish overnight because she would continually call her equally parasitic pals over to loot our refrigerator and pantry as if they owned the place. I was paying $250 per month for food contributions, whereas she was easily spending $600 or more per month on delivery expenses alone. Money that clearly wasn't coming from any genuine employment or her mysterious transitional period budget, as my parents kept mentioning. The exact breaking point that pushed me over the line was when I watched her Instagram post showing off a brand new $3,000 Louis Vuitton purse, professionally posed with professional lighting and captioned, "Treating myself. Dr. Blessed, Dr. Entrepreneur, Dr. Boss Babe, Dr. Living My Best Life." That night I engaged in some serious internet detective work that was perhaps not quite legal. I managed to locate her OnlyFans account. Yes, it was as upsetting and disgusting as you could imagine seeing your own sister like that. I also used some basic arithmetic to estimate her actual monthly earnings. Based on her subscriber numbers, premium content rates, posting frequency, and the tips I saw, this lady was easily earning between $15,000 and $20,000 per month. Let me repeat that statistic so it sinks in. My sister earned more money in 1 month than I did in 5 months of physically demanding construction job that was ruining my body. And I was the family member who was charged rent to live at home. I established a new spreadsheet tab labeled Kayla's Estimated Income versus Actual Household Contributions Analysis. Calculating and thinking about the financial ratio made me physically sick. 2 months into this rental agreement nightmare, I learned something that drove me from frustrated aggravation to outright hatred. During a break at work, I checked my credit card statement online. I only used the card in true situations and always paid the whole balance as soon as I detected many charges that I clearly did not recognize. And I'm talking about a large number of fraudulent charges spread across several weeks. $340 at the Sephora cosmetics store. $156 at Victoria's Secret. $89 at a boutique I had never heard of in my life. Multiple food delivery fees totaling more than $400 in a single month. A $79 monthly subscription to a premium content development platform for which I had never signed up. $67 at a nail salon. The Ring Light Pro Studio equipment costs $156. All were charged to my own credit card. Everything is absolutely unauthorized, all for something I would never purchase in a million years. I approached Kayla that weekend when she was in the kitchen preparing one of her elaborate smoothie bowl Instagram images, replete with professional ring lighting and phone camera equipment that took up half of the available counter area. "Did you use my credit card for any purchases recently?" She didn't even look up from arranging fresh berries in perfectly symmetrical arrangements for her photograph. "Yeah. Like twice maybe. For emergency situations that couldn't wait." Emergency situations. I took out my phone and showed her the complete statement. $340 at Sephora constituted an emergency? I needed professional grade supplies for content creation activities. It's a legitimate business expense that I'll write off on taxes. Paid for with my money without my permission. That's called fraud. She finally looked up at me with an eye-rolling face, as if I were being absolutely unreasonable about everything. "God, Ethan, you're being so overdramatic about every little thing. It's not like you can't afford these small amounts. You basically live here for free anyway, so what's the big deal?" For free. While paying them $1,800 per month like clockwork. You absolutely cannot just use someone else's credit card without explicit permission. That's literally credit card fraud, which is a serious crime. You gave me the account number that one time when I needed money for textbooks when I was still in school. That was over a year ago for legitimate educational expenses that we discussed beforehand. She returned to her sophisticated photography gear as if our talk were over. "Whatever, Ethan, I'll pay you back when I get around to it and have some free time." When I attempted to discuss the theft matter with my parents later that evening, Dad's response was, "You two need to work out these sibling disputes between yourselves like adults. We're not getting involved in petty arguments over money." Sibling disputes, like credit card theft, were simply petty disagreements about television remote control privileges or who got to choose dinner. I spent the entire night poring through 6 months' worth of detailed credit card statements with a fine-tooth comb. The total amount of fraudulent charges exceeded $2,800. Almost $3,000 in fraudulent purchases for beauty, costly clothing, meal delivery, subscription services, and business-related equipment. But the big kick in the gut that made me see red was discovering a $500 charge to some high-end photographic studio downtown. When I reverse searched the business location online, I discovered that it specialized in boudoir and artistic photography services, with a portfolio full of suggestive photographs. She had used my credit card to pay for professional picture shoots for her OnlyFans posts. I was practically paying my own sister's adult content career while she lived rent-free, and I was financially drained every month. That night, I opened a new browser window and began researching how to dispute fraudulent credit card charges, but I stopped midway through. Filing official fraud disputes would cause instant problems and complications, possibly even legal ones, which could backfire on me. And I began to realize that creating immediate, evident problems might not be the best long-term method for coping with this predicament. Instead, I opened new tabs and searched for asset protection measures, LLC formation criteria in Colorado, and property investment for beginners. If my family insisted on treating me like a business transaction rather than a son, perhaps it was time for me to think and act like a serious businessman who knew how to protect himself. I created the company banking account on a Tuesday during my lunch break at the building site. Drove 30 minutes across town to a credit union in an entirely different neighborhood, nestled between a pawn shop and a used car dealership. The ideal spot for keeping complete privacy and going under the radar of anyone who might know my family. The account representative was an older gentleman who appeared to have encountered every possible financial circumstance in his career and had learnt not to pass judgment. When he inquired about the company's objective and planned activities, I provided a basic explanation. Property investments, financial advisory services, and asset management. I funded the original account with my construction company's quarterly safety bonus of $1,200, which I received for having zero workplace mishaps in the previous 3 months. It wasn't a lot, but it provided a firm foundation on which I could carefully grow. Any particular reason for choosing a separate financial institution over your current bank? The representative inquired in a professional tone. Just keeping a clear separation between business and personal finances, I explained gently. You know how important proper accounting practices are for tax purposes and legal protection. I incorporated the entire organization into Rodco Holdings, LLC, which was named after my family's surname but generic enough to prevent drawing notice from anyone who was casually investigating business data. All business correspondence was addressed to a POI hired a box from a postal facility across town under the company's name. That evening, I fully upgraded and expanded my spreadsheet documentation system. What had begun as simple record-keeping was quickly turning into a complete financial intelligence gathering operation that would make my former Army intelligence colleagues proud. I made detailed tabs for monthly rent payments and fee tracking analysis, household expenses breakdown, actual costs versus amounts charged to me, Kayla's unauthorized spending documentation with dates and amounts, parents' actual income and expense patterns based on observation, local property research and market analysis data, legal precedent research for financial exploitation cases, asset protection strategies, and business formation options. The more I looked into my family's true financial status, the more disturbing the whole image got. I realized Dad had been entirely lying about his employment condition after very careful monitoring and stealthy document photographing when no one was home. He was not actually laid off or working fewer hours, as he had claimed for months. He was still working full-time at the steel factory, but on a new shift schedule and earning around $3,800 per month before taxes. Mom's purported part-time boutique job paid a respectable $2,200 per month. Their total household income was firmly in the middle-class range, so why did they keep claiming to be in financial trouble and unable to pay essential bills? The answer became obvious when I began tracking their actual spending patterns and habits over several weeks. Dad was spending $300 or more per month at an Indian casino about an hour outside of town. On weekend visits he said were for job interviews or networking activities, but were clearly gambling binges. Mom was spending insane amounts of money on MLM pyramid scheme products including essential oils, supplements, skincare systems, and weight reduction drinks, which she would then try to resell to her friends and coworkers at a loss. And both parents were continually buying expensive gifts, clothes and experiences for Kayla without expecting anything in return. They were not charging me rent since they truly needed help with actual household bills. They were charging me rent because they were absolutely financially irresponsible and saw me as a simple, dependable source of revenue to cover their poor judgments and fund their daughter's lifestyle. Meanwhile, I began networking with experienced construction crew members to discuss real estate investing options and methods. Construction job provides access to extremely valuable insider information. Which neighborhoods are receiving large development projects? Which properties have concealed structural issues that are not visible to typical buyers? Where and why do clever investors move their money? My foreman has been flipping houses as a prosperous side business for more than a decade. During our lunch breaks, he began educating me about property investment principles, market analysis methodologies, remodeling cost estimation, and, most crucially, how to structure real estate transactions for maximum privacy and tax benefits. The key to everything in this business, he continued while we ate sandwiches in his vehicle, is having better information than the other party in any transaction. When you know more than they do about the real situation, you control the entire outcome. I took that advice seriously and began applying the same concepts to my family circumstances. 4 months into this rental agreement nightmare, my foreman contacted me with something that may drastically change my destiny. "Hey, remember that house where we did the emergency foundation repair work last month? The one over on Maple Street with the cracked basement?" I definitely remembered. Very pleasant area with good construction quality throughout. However, the property owners were going through a very unpleasant divorce, and both parties wanted to sell quickly and move on with their lives. It's going to public auction next week. Divorce proceedings got really messy with lawyers involved. Neither spouse wants to keep the property, and the bank is highly motivated to move it quickly to avoid foreclosure costs. He sent me the official auction description over the cell phone: 3-bedroom ranch-style house with 1,800 square feet of living space, a 2-car attached garage, and a nice-sized yard with mature landscaping and established trees. Under typical market conditions, it may be valued $280,000 or more. The auction estimate range was set as $180,000 to $200,000. Cash purchasers receive significant preference and priority positioning. You interested in potentially partnering up on this deal? For months I had been diligently conserving every possible dime. In addition, my military experience provided me with VA loan benefits, but I was still a long way from having that much capital accessible for investment. Then, my foreman revealed the true opportunity hiding in this predicament. Property needs approximately $30,000 in renovation and improvement work, mostly cosmetic improvements and updates that we could easily handle ourselves with our skills and contractor connections. But here's the really interesting part: location and size mean you could easily rent it for $2,200 to $2,400 monthly. And this is being conservative with market estimates. He used his phone's browser to look up comparable rental properties in the same neighborhood. His stats were not overstated at all. Similar houses were renting for the same amounts. I provide the real estate expertise, contractor network connections, and project management experience. You provide the capital investment and handle ongoing property management responsibilities. We split all profits 60-40 in your favor since you're putting up the actual money and taking the financial risk. That night, I examined the financial estimates in over 50 different ways, taking into account numerous scenarios and market situations. With my building knowledge and his remodeling expertise, we could definitely accomplish the entire rehab project for around $20,000 rather than the anticipated $30,000. With a monthly rental income of $2,300, the property would create positive cash flow from the first month and have the potential for long-term growth. More significant than the money, it would give me something I urgently needed: genuine power and complete freedom from my family's financial tyranny. The next morning, I contacted the credit union and booked a meeting to discuss investment property financing alternatives. As it turned out, my military service record, together with my consistent employment history and the money I'd been systematically saving, qualified me for significantly better financing terms than I'd anticipated. By Thursday afternoon, Rodco Holdings LLC had received official pre-approval for $200,000 in property investment financing at attractive interest rates. Friday morning, my foreman and I stood on the courthouse steps, waiting for the public auction to start. Bidding began at $160,000. There were perhaps 8 other potential bidders present, but most of them left soon as it became clear that this was not going to be a cheap deal. My foreman and I had previously agreed on a maximum bid of $190,000, which we would not exceed. When the auctioneer's hammer dropped at $185,000, we had officially purchased our first investment property. Walking away from the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not just hope or optimism, but real power and influence over my own fate. For the first time since the beginning of this familial exploitation issue, I wasn't simply reacting defensively to what others were doing to me. I was making smart offensive maneuvers that may affect everything. The next 6 weeks were some of the most physically demanding work I'd ever done, but it was also the most personally rewarding and meaningful. My foreman and I spent every weekend and most workday evenings renovating that auction property into something truly unique and move-in ready. We installed new luxury vinyl flooring throughout the house, painted in modern neutral colors that would appeal to professional tenants, replaced all light fixtures with energy-efficient LED systems, and completely renovated the kitchen with granite countertops and matching stainless steel appliances. I did the majority of the actual physical labor myself, which dramatically reduced material expenses while providing me with something practical and forward-thinking to focus on, aside from the continuous mess at home. My parents barely noticed my disappearance on most weekends and evenings. They were too occupied facilitating Kayla's latest entrepreneurial plans and lifestyle choices. She'd launched a confidence coaching business in addition to her OnlyFans operation, charging desperate women $500 for personal empowerment consultations that essentially consisted of urging them to expose more skin in their social media postings and embrace their feminine strength. With all of her online projects and business interests, the girl was now earning about $25,000 per month. And she was still living rent-free, whilst I was paying $1,800 per month for the luxury of sleeping in a twin bed and having my credit card stolen for her business purposes. But I was chronicling everything with fanatical care. She documented every luxury purchase on Instagram and TikTok, including location tags and pricing information. Every time she borrowed her parents' automobiles instead of her own BMW, either it was in the shop or she didn't want to put miles on it. Every family dinner where she bought expensive takeaway for everyone, and then cleverly forgot her wallet when the bill arrived, forcing my parents to pay. The renovation project was nearing completion when I came across something that radically altered my perspective of what my parents were planned. On a Saturday morning, I was replacing a broken sprinkler head in our front yard when our next-door friend stopped by to chat. She's a sweet elderly lady who has lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and observes everything that happens on our street. "Are your parents getting ready to sell the house?" she inquired in a kind, inquiring tone. "What? No, definitely not. Why would you think that?" "Oh, I saw a real estate agent taking photographs and measurements last week. Professional-looking woman with a clipboard and measuring tape. Thought maybe they were preparing to list the property for sale." My stomach had absolutely plummeted to the ground. What real estate agent? When exactly was this? She recounted a professional woman who had spent approximately an hour photographing the house from several angles, measuring various rooms, and taking thorough notes on official-looking paperwork, complete with business cards and official documents. That night, I conducted extensive web research on local real estate activity. I located the agent's name using the MLS database system which my foreman had shown me how to use. I called her office the next day, pretending to be a potential buyer looking for neighboring properties. "Oh yes, the Carter property on Pine Street," she said quickly. "We're not quite ready to list officially yet, but the owners are definitely considering a spring timeline for selling. Were you specifically interested in that particular area?" My parents were covertly plotting to sell our family home. The same house that they were charging me $1,800 per month to live in. Without informing me of their plans or schedule. I hung up the phone and quickly contacted my foreman. "How quickly can we get our rental property completely ready for tenants?" 2 weeks maximum, maybe 10 days if we really push hard and work some long hours." "Why the sudden urgency?" "Because I think I'm about to become homeless, and I need to accelerate our entire timeline before that happens." That weekend, my foreman and I worked around-the-clock shifts to complete every last detail. By the following Friday evening, the house was fully rental-ready and looked fantastic. We listed it online Saturday morning, using professional images that made it look like a magazine feature. By Sunday night, we had 12 qualifying applications and a quickly expanding waiting list of prospective tenants. The couple we chose was ideal for our needs. Young professionals in their late 20s, both with steady jobs and outstanding credit ratings, with no red flags in their histories or rental history. They wanted to move in immediately and offered $2,400 per month, which was $100 higher than our asking price. My foreman grinned as we signed the leasing agreement. "Congratulations, partner. You're officially a successful landlord with positive cash flow." But I was not thinking about rental revenue or commercial success at the time. I was thinking about the final step of what I intended to do next, and how wonderful that would be. I moved out on a Wednesday morning, while everyone else was, as expected, away from the house going about their daily lives. Kayla had her weekly content production session at a downtown photography studio. Mom was at her book club meeting, while Dad was in the casino, pretending to be attending a job interview or networking event. I had been secretly shifting my key items to a storage container for several weeks, so there wasn't much left in my room. Essential clothing, my laptop computer, and a few personal belongings having sentimental value from my military career. Everything that was actually important to me fit easily into my pickup truck with room to spare. On the kitchen table, I placed my house key and a single piece of paper with a short professional message. I am terminating my rental agreement with this property with immediate effect. As agreed, the final rent payment was processed on March 1st, and all utilities and services registered in my name will be disconnected within 48 hours. Any future communication should be directed to Rodco Holdings, LLC, at P.O. Box 2847, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Ethan Carter. No emotional appeals. There are no detailed explanations. There is no place for argument or negotiation. Just hard business facts provided with the same emotionless accuracy as the original invoice. But here's where everyone who's read thus far will find the story truly rewarding. What my family didn't realize was that I had been doing far more research than just property values and rental markets. I'd spent the last few months meticulously studying their financial condition, business activities, and, most significantly, Kayla's web company operations and legal compliance. My enterprising sister had been making some severe blunders, and they were going to catch up with her. The first important discovery was that she had never declared any of her large OnlyFans revenue to the IRS. We're talking about more than $200,000 in fully unreported revenue over the last year and a half. That is federal tax evasion area, with substantial legal ramifications, including possible prison time. Second discovery. She'd been using our parents' home address for all of her business correspondence, tax documents, and legal documentation. Which meant that when the IRS came to investigate, which they undoubtedly would, Mom and Dad would be identified as potential tax fraud accessories. The third and most lovely finding was that she had been advertising and filming her OnlyFans content utilizing images and films filmed around our parents' house, including the master bedroom, living room, kitchen, backyard, and pretty much every room. This meant they were technically running a commercial adult entertainment business out of a residential property, which was a blatant violation of around 6 separate city codes and HOA rules. However, I did not immediately submit these violations to the proper authorities on an anonymous basis. That method would have been overly simplistic and direct. Instead, I patiently waited for the right moment to maximize impact. I received the phone call I had been waiting for around 2 weeks after moving out and establishing my independence. Dad's voice was tense with barely contained panic and stress. "Ethan, we really need to talk immediately. Can you come over to the house right now? I don't live there anymore, remember? You can schedule an appointment through my business email address if needed." "You're what, Ethan?" "This is extremely serious. We received some very official letters today that we don't understand." I understood just which letters he was referring about. Kayla received an IRS audit notification needing an immediate response. The city issues code enforcement violation notices with significant fines. The HOA fine documentation totals thousands of dollars. Due to legal issues, the real estate agent's contract was canceled. You see, after I moved out and gained complete independence, I made many strategic phone calls over the course of a week. Anonymous tips about unreported income should be directed to the IRS fraud hotline, along with precise details and documentation. Detailed complaints regarding business activities in residential areas to code enforcement, including photographic evidence. Provide comprehensive evidence of HOA violations to the Homeowners Association Board, including documentation. I can meet you at the coffee shop downtown Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock sharp. When they arrived for our meeting, they appeared to have aged 10 years in just 2 weeks. Dad's hair appeared gray and thinner. Mom had noticeable stress lines around her eyes. Kayla looked like she had been crying for days. I sat across from them in my best business casual outfit, maintaining a completely neutral, professional attitude while holding a heavy folder of official paperwork beside my coffee cup. "So," I continued gently, "what seems to be the problem?" Dad passed a huge stack of official government letters across the table, his hands quivering. "IRS audit notification requires a quick response. City code violations are issued with escalating fines. HOA infraction documentation resulted in $15,000 in penalties. They received word that their homeowner's insurance had been revoked due to unreported commercial activity on the property. We don't understand what's happening to us," Mom begged passionately. "Everything hit us at once like some kind of coordinated attack." I went over the documents deliberately, as if I were seeing them for the first time. Wow, this is pretty serious stuff. Federal tax issues, city violations, insurance problems. "Can you help us figure this out?" Dad begged, desperation in his voice. "I know things got complicated when you moved out, but we're still family." "Help you in what specific way?" Maybe you could move back home," Mom offered with enthusiasm. "Help us navigate this situation. We could definitely adjust the rent arrangement to something more reasonable." I pretended to take their idea extremely seriously. "What kind of adjustment were you thinking?" We could lower it to $1,500 per month, Dad remarked hastily, as if he was offering me a tremendous deal. Maybe even $1,200, Mom said when I didn't answer instantly with enthusiasm. I let the stillness linger uncomfortably until Kayla erupted emotionally. This is completely ridiculous. Ethan, just help us. You know I can pay whatever stupid fees these are. Actually, I stated calmly, opening my documents folder. That's a significant part of the problem we're dealing with here. I put out printouts of everything I'd been meticulously documenting over months. Bank statements reveal her undisclosed revenue patterns. Screenshots from her social media posts. Advertising content was filmed in their home. Printed documents of the city ordinances she had violated. Tax code explanations that emphasize her legal obligations and penalties. Kayla, based on my research and calculations, you owe approximately $78,000 in federal taxes, plus substantial penalties and interest charges. The city fines will total around $25,000 if you don't immediately cease all commercial operations. And since all of this illegal activity was happening at Mom and Dad's registered address. I turned around to confront my parents. You're considered legal accessories under federal law. Dad's face had lost its color totally. What does that mean exactly? It means the IRS can pursue your assets too. House, vehicles, bank accounts, retirement savings. Everything you own can be seized to pay these debts. Kayla stared at the documents as if they were written in a completely alien language. But I didn't know I had to pay taxes on that income. Nobody told me. Ignorance of tax law isn't considered a legal defense, I stated matter-of-factly. But there might be a potential solution to this situation. Hope flared desperately in Dad's eyes. What kind of solution? Well, you need immediate cash flow to start paying these substantial debts before they get worse. You need someone with business experience to help navigate these complex legal issues. And you need to completely restructure your entire financial situation to ensure compliance. I retrieved another set of official paperwork from my folder. Rodco Holdings LLC is prepared to offer a comprehensive debt management and property improvement package that could solve all of these problems. The proposal was truly stunning in its exquisite simplicity. Rodco would buy their house for $220,000, which was about $30,000 less than the current market value but enough to cover their existing mortgage and some tax debt. They may then rent the property back from me for $2,200 per month. While they worked out their legal and financial issues, Kayla was compelled to immediately cease all content creation activities and seek real job in order to begin paying her significant tax responsibilities. All of her future income would be tracked and managed by Rodco to assure perfect legal compliance. Mom and Dad would keep their current occupations, but all of their funds would be controlled using a tight budget system that I would personally oversee to avoid future difficulties. This is completely insane, Kayla exclaimed, her voice rising. You want us to pay you rent to live in our own house? It's not your house anymore, I said gently. You're about to lose it anyway when the IRS places a lien on the property for unpaid taxes. This arrangement allows you to stay here. How much monthly rent are we talking about? Dad inquired calmly. $2,200, current market rate for a property this size, plus utilities, which you'll pay directly. That's more than you were paying us. No, I responded firmly. That's what you should have been charging someone who was actually capable of paying it consistently without stealing from family members. I stood up and collected my paperwork methodically. You have exactly 48 hours to make your decision. After that deadline, you're on your own with the IRS and the legal system. They phoned me exactly 6 hours later and accepted the entire offer without discussion. I was the child they despised, shut out of every reunion. But now I return in triumph, owning the very house they once used to cast me aside. For years they silenced me with sighs, excuses and empty seats at my milestones. But this year, everything changes. Because while they prepared for another reunion at the beach house, I bought it. And when they walk through those doors, they won't find the forgotten daughter they dismissed. They'll face the woman they can no longer ignore. My name is Vicky, and I am the family disappointment. At least that's what my mother Margaret always reminds me of, whether with pointed silence or barely veiled sighs of disgust. You're not going to let it get to you again this year, are you? Adrian inquired, peering over the cubicle wall. His anxious expression prompted me to hastily close the email. Of course not, I lied, attempting to smile. Just another day at the office. But this wasn't just an ordinary day. The family beach house housed every major memory from my childhood before everything changed and I became an outsider. I recall the summer I turned 12, when everything changed. "Vicky darling, why don't you help in the kitchen?" Mom had said while Cassie was able to attend Dad's business meetings on the deck. "Brandon sweetheart, go show the neighbors your new project." While I sat alone reading books, they thought it was a waste of time. My phone vibrated. I received a text from my childhood friend Claire. "Let me guess. Another reunion email." I responded, "Bingo. Wanna bet how long before Mom calls to explain why there's limited space this year?" The answer arrived within 1 hour. My mother's name appeared on my phone screen just on time. "Vicky dear," she began, her voice full of fake sweetness. "About the reunion." "Let me save you the trouble, Mom," I interrupted, surprising myself with my composure. "The house is too full, right? Cassie's kids need their space, or is it Brandon's new girlfriend who needs the extra room this year?" The stillness at the other end was deafening. "Well, you know how it is," she finally said. "Cassie's children are at such an important age." I looked at the promotion letter on my desk, the one I hadn't told them about. The 35-year-old senior vice president is the youngest in the company's history. "Yeah, Mom, I know exactly how it is." After hanging up, I proceeded to Lance's office, my mentor and supervisor for the past decade. He looked up from his computer and read my expression immediately. "Family?" he inquired, indicating toward the chair opposite from him. I nodded and sank into the seat. "Sometimes I wonder why I still let it affect me." "Because you're human," he replied simply. "But you know what? The best revenge is success," I said with a weak smile. "No." He leaned forward, his eyes sparkling. "The best revenge is becoming so successful they can't ignore you anymore. Speaking of which, have you considered my proposal about the Richardson merger?" I took out my tablet and pushed thoughts of family aside. "Actually, I've been working on some numbers. What if we approached it from a different angle?" For the following hour, we focused on work, which is my true comfort zone. As I explained my idea to Lance, I felt a familiar wave of confidence return. This was where I belonged and excelled. Later that evening, while I was driving home, Claire called. "You know what you need?" she asked, without preface. "A plan." "A plan for what?" "To show them exactly what they've been missing. You're not that scared little girl anymore, Vicky. You're a force to be reckoned with." I came to a stop at a red light, seeing the city lights blur through my windshield. What's the point? They've made it clear where I stand. The point is, you deserve better, and maybe it's time they realize that too. After disconnecting up, I sat in my parked car, gazing over my opulent apartment complex. 10 years ago, I began as an intern, determined to prove everyone wrong. I now had everything they claimed I'd never have: success, respect, independence, with the exception of family approval. My phone received another email. Cassie shared images from last year's reunion. Smiling faces, inside jokes, and shared memories I didn't participate in. But instead of the typical pain, I sensed something else stirring within me: determination. I opened my laptop and navigated to the real estate website I had been following. The beach house's market value had decreased dramatically during the recent economic slump. Our parents could no longer afford to maintain the seaside cottage. "Time for a different kind of investment," I said to myself, pressing the contact agent button. Maybe Claire was correct. Perhaps it was time for a plan. Not for vengeance, I reminded myself, but for justice. The type that comes with compound interest. Standing in front of the board of directors, I conveyed to them that the Richardson merger is more than merely combining assets. It's about redefining market presence. My laser pointer indicated important projections on the screen behind me. Adrian sat at the far end of the conference table and gave me a discreet thumbs up. We both realized how important this moment was after spending several late nights preparing for it. "And you're certain about these numbers?" Mr. Harrington leaned closer, his wrinkled face examining the facts. "I stake my reputation on them," I said without hesitation. "More importantly, I stake the future of both our companies on them." Lance cleared his throat as he sat near Mr. Harrington. "Vicky has never steered us wrong before. Her track record speaks for itself." The meeting ended 2 hours later with handshakes and signed tentative agreements. Lance approached me as the board members were leaving. "Outstanding work," he said, beaming. "Though I have to ask, why didn't you mention the promotion opportunity in Hong Kong? This merger's success practically guarantees you the position." My stomach constricted. The worldwide division head position was a career-defining opportunity that coincided with the impending family reunion dates. I'm still considering my options, I explained cautiously. Back at my desk, Adrian sat on the edge, coffee in hand. Spill it. What's really holding you back? This is everything you've worked for. My phone buzzed before I could answer. Cassie's name appeared over the screen. I let it go to voicemail. That's what's holding her back, Claire said, emerging with lunch bags. Family drama, as usual. I thought we were meeting at the cafe, I explained, thankful for the interruption. Changed my mind. Besides, I wanted to see the aftermath of your big presentation. She distributed sandwiches and gave me a knowing glance. So, Hong Kong. News travels fast, I said. In this case, good news should travel fast, Adrian emphasized. You can't seriously be considering passing this up because of them. My phone vibrated again. A text from Cassie. Mom is inquiring if you received the reunion email. Kindly answer. Claire grabbed my phone. Oh hell no, you know what this is? This is them realizing they can't ignore you anymore. The family gossip vine must have caught wind of your success. Give me my phone back. I reached for it, but she kept it away. Not until you promise to stop letting them dictate your life choices. I'm not. I began to protest, but Adrian interrupted me. Vicky, remember last month's charity gala when you commanded that room full of CEOs? That's who you really are. Not the invisible middle child they made you feel like. My phone vibrated a third time. Brandon this time. Hello sis, long time. Have you got a minute to chat? Suddenly, everyone wants to talk, I said dryly. Because you're becoming impossible to ignore, Claire smiled. Now, about Hong Kong. The timing, Perfect, Adrian concluded. Show them exactly what they're missing while they're playing happy family at their precious beach house. Lance appeared at my office doorway. Vicky, Mr. Harrington wants to discuss implementation strategies over dinner tonight. I stood and straightened my jacket. Text me the details. Claire raised an eyebrow when Lance left. Look at you. Power moves only. It's just dinner, I explained, but I couldn't stop smiling. Just dinner with one of the most influential men in the industry, Adrian clarified. While your family probably thinks you're still pushing papers in some entry-level position. My phone displayed another message. Mom this time. Vicky, please call whenever you can. Important family issues to discuss. Claire read it over my shoulder and snorted. Important family matters. Like how they're running out of excuses to exclude you? I took up my presentation papers, my thoughts immediately turning to the supper ahead. They can keep their excuses, I've got an empire to build. That's my girl, Adrian smiled. Speaking of building things, have you made an offer on the beach house yet? Tomorrow, I murmured, looking at my makeup in my small mirror. The agent says we're the only serious buyers in this market. Perfect timing, Claire sings. Right before they announce this year's reunion details. As I packed my belongings for the Richardson dinner, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. My family may have mastered the skill of making me feel little, but in this world, I was anything but. Hey, Adrian said as I walked out. Don't forget who you are in there. Show them what Vicky Unleashed looks like. I grinned as I thought about the beach house listing in my inbox. Oh, I intend to show everyone exactly who I am. Congratulations, Ms. Brooks. The beach house is yours. The real estate agent slid the keys over her desk, the metal surface shimmering in the fluorescent lighting. My hand trembled slightly when I lifted them. These little bits of metal symbolized more than just property ownership. They held the key to my history, and more crucially, my future. I can't believe you actually did it, Claire said, squeezing my arm. The agent smiled professionally. The paperwork will be processed by end of business day. Given the current market conditions, you've made an incredibly shrewd investment. Walking out of the office, I gripped the keys so tightly that they left impressions in my palm. My phone vibrated. Lance is calling. Tell me you closed the deal, he added without elaborating. Just sign the papers. Perfect timing. The Hong Kong position is yours if you want it. Board approved this morning. Claire collided with me after I stopped walking. Already? I thought the decision wasn't until next month. Your performance at the Richardson dinner sealed it. Speaking of which, he specifically requested you lead the merger transition team. Claire was virtually jumping from excitement after hearing both sides of the exchange. As I hung up, she grabbed my shoulders. Okay, this is literally perfect. You own their precious beach house, and you're about to become an international executive. Please tell me you're going to milk this for all it's worth. My phone rang with a text from Cassie. This weekend the family is meeting to discuss the reunion. Mom insists that you come. Please. Oh, this is too good, Claire laughed. They have no idea you own their reunion venue. Neither does the agent, I told her. I made sure the purchase went through my corporation name. Sneaky, I love it. As we headed to the car, she linked her arm with mine. So what's the plan? Before I could respond, Adrian called. Lance just told me the news. Both pieces of news. You're going to accept Hong Kong, right? I haven't decided, I said, putting him on speaker as we drove. What's to decide? It's perfect. You can run the merger from Asia, build your international profile, and let your family stew in their regrets. Speaking of stewing, Claire added, Vicky just got summoned to a family meeting about the reunion. No way, Adrian said, laughing. Are you going? I turned into the coastal road, going for the beach home, my beach house. Actually, yes, I think it's time for a visit. The familiar trip seemed odd now. Every curve in the road, every glimpse of ocean between the trees, belonged to me in a manner it had never done before. I stopped in front of the large Victorian house, which had worn blue paint and white trim just as I recalled. Claire whistled softly. I forgot how gorgeous this place is. No wonder they're desperate to keep the reunions going. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door with my new keys. The house smelt like sea salt and memories, summer nights, family dinners, and hushed conversations. But beneath it all was the wonderful perfume of success. My telephone rang. Mom. Vicky, are you coming this weekend? Cassie said she texted you. Actually, Mom, I'm at the beach house right now. Silence. Then, what? How? The realtor said it was sold. Did she? Interesting. I moved across the living room, my fingers tracing the familiar walls. Don't worry about it. I'll see you this weekend. I hung up before she could reply. Claire was recording everything on her phone, scarcely able to suppress her excitement. That was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Did you hear her voice crack? Send me that video, Adrian requested across the speaker. I need it for posterity. I opened the French doors to the terrace and breathed in the ocean air. You know what's funny? They always said I didn't understand the value of family tradition. But I'm the one who saved it by buying it out from under them. Claire smirked and said, Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying something. It's about preserving it on your own terms, I explained, watching the waves crash below. My phone vibrated again. Cassie, Brandon, and Mom appear in quick succession. I disregarded them all. So, Adrian's voice crackled over the speaker. What's the next move, boss? I grinned, thinking of the forthcoming family meeting. Now, we prepare for a reunion they'll never forget. Claire asked, Do you want company this weekend? I make an excellent witness. No, I replied, bringing out my laptop. This is something I need to do alone. But first, I have a Hong Kong acceptance letter to write. Standing on my veranda, overlooking the ocean, I could feel the final parts of my plan fitting into place. The fearful little girl who used to hide in this house's corners was vanished. In her place stood someone they hadn't expected, someone they had to finally admit. The sound of automobile doors slamming startled me from my laptop. I'd been working on merger documents all morning, admiring the seaside view from my new home office, when familiar voices emerged from the driveway. Mom, I'm telling you, Vicky was acting weird on the phone, Cassie said, her voice echoing through the open windows. She's always weird, Brandon said. Remember last Christmas? I closed my laptop carefully, my heart racing. They were early. The family meeting wasn't scheduled to happen until tomorrow. Through the glass, I saw them unloading their cars as if they owned the place, which they no longer did. My phone vibrated. Adrian. Game time. They're here early, I replied back. Wish me luck. Show no mercy, was his immediate response. I heard the rattling of keys at the front door, followed by confused voices. Mom, your key isn't working, Cassie said. That's impossible. I just had it checked last month. I walked downstairs, each step calculated and deliberate in my Louboutin heels. The click of my heels on the floor silenced the noises outside. I grinned as I opened the door, taking in their surprised expressions. Looking for something? Mom's hand rose to her chest. What are you doing here? How did you get in? I live here, I simply stated, stepping aside. Please come in, my house is your house. Literally. The silence that followed was delightful. Cassie's mouth expanded and closed like a fish. Brandon dropped his duffel bag. What do you mean you live here? Mom eventually said. I strolled into the kitchen, knowing they'd follow. Coffee? I just made a fresh pot. Colombian roast. I know how much you love it, Mom. Vicky. Cassie's voice had that familiar elder sister edge. What's going on? I poured myself a cup and enjoyed their uncertainty. I thought the family meeting was tomorrow. Did I miss a memo? Oh, wait. I smirked over my cup. I guess I'm not usually included in those. Stop playing games, Brandon demanded. How are you even in here? This is our family house. Actually, I brought out my phone and opened the property documentation. It's my house now. Has been for 2 weeks. Would you like to see the deed? Mom slumped onto a kitchen chair. That's impossible. We would have known. Would you? When was the last time any of you asked me what I was doing with my life? I leaned against the counter, taking in their expressions. Coffee? No? Your loss. It's imported. Cassie grabbed my phone and scrolled through the documents. This can't be real. How could you possibly afford? The same way I afford my penthouse apartment, my vacation home in Aspen, and my car collection. My tone was casual. I work. Remember work? That thing you all said I'd never figure out. Your what? Brandon sputtered. A car door banged outside again. Dad's voice echoed through the open door. Why is everyone standing around? Help me with these groceries. In here, Dad, I cried out. Let me help you with those. He appeared in the doorway, baggage in hand, and then paused. Vicky, what's going on? Family meeting came early. I took the luggage from him and unpacked them quickly. Though, I should point out, next time you might want to check with me before buying groceries for my house. Your house? He asked Mom, who was still sitting in stunned silence. Perhaps we should all sit down, I said, nodding toward the dining room. I believe we have some catching up to do. They followed me like bewildered sheep, gathering around the table where we'd shared numerous family dinners, meals from which I was sometimes banished, relegated to the kitchen to assist with dishes. So I sat at the head of the table, where Dad used to sit. About this year's reunion. You can't just buy our family home, Cassie exclaimed. This is our tradition. Funny thing about traditions, I remarked, scrutinizing my manicure. They're only as strong as the people maintaining them. When the bank called about foreclosure proceedings, where was your tradition then? Mom's head snapped up. How did you know about that? I know everything, Mom. I know about the missed payments, the second mortgage, the tax liens. I know because unlike some people, I do my research before making investment decisions. My phone vibrated again. Claire. Need a backup? It's all good. Operation Karma is currently under progress. I responded back and grinned as I looked up at my family's surprised expressions. Now, about those reunion plans, I was thinking we might need to make some changes this year. After all, I indicated to the ocean vista through the windows. New house, new rules. The sight of dawning awareness on their faces was better than any merger transaction I'd ever completed. You could have told us, Cassie murmured, breaking the uneasy calm that had settled in the dining room. About your success, your career, everything. Could I? I asked, raising an eyebrow. When? Between being uninvited to family gatherings or during those holiday calls that never came? Dad cleared his throat. Now Vicky, that's not entirely fair. Fair? I laughed, my voice sharp enough to make Mom cringe. Let's talk about fair. Remember my college graduation when you all skipped it because Brandon had a soccer game? That was different, Mom said softly. Brandon was up for a scholarship. Which he didn't get, I concluded. Meanwhile, I was accepting my MBA with honors. Not that any of you knew, since you never asked. My phone vibrated. Lance. The Hong Kong announcement will be made public tomorrow. Do you want me to delay? Perfect timing. Proceed as planned. I texted back. Brandon leaned forwards. So what now? You're going to hold this over our heads? Make us beg to use our own family house? Your family house? I asked as I walked to the newly refurbished kitchen. Come see what your family house looked like when I bought it. The rotting deckboards, the leaking roof, the outdated wiring that was one storm away from burning this place down. I opened a folder on the counter and laid out the before and after images. $60,000 in repairs just to make it livable. Another $100,000 in renovations. Where was your family pride then? Cassie picked up a photograph, her face pale. We didn't know it was this bad. Because none of you bothered to check. You just assumed everything would magically take care of itself. Like you assumed I'd never amount to anything. Dad stood up abruptly. That's enough. We may have made mistakes, but you're still our daughter. Am I? I turned to face him. Because from where I'm standing, I've been your afterthought for 20 years. My phone flashed up with a news alert. The Hong Kong announcement leaked early. Mom's phone buzzed seconds later, and her eyes widened as she read. Vice President of International Operations, she muttered. Vicky, you're moving to Hong Kong? Among other things. I smiled as I poured myself another cup of coffee. The merger I just closed is worth more than this house and everything in it. Cassie grabbed Mom's phone and read aloud. Youngest executive in company history, revolutionary merger strategy projected to triple market share. Impossible, Brandon murmured. You're just Vicky. Just Vicky? I said gently. Funny how that works, isn't it? The daughter you never believed in now owns your precious beach house and runs a global division. Dad sank back in his chair. Why didn't you tell us? I did. Every time I tried to talk about work, you changed the subject to Cassie's kids or Brandon's latest venture. Every achievement, every promotion, met with polite disinterest. My phone vibrated again. Adrian. Stocks rose 12% following the Hong Kong news. You're currently trending on LinkedIn. Mom was still glancing at her cell phone. These numbers, Vicky. These are more money than you can imagine, I explained. Yes, they are. And that's just the beginning. So what happens now? Cassie inquired calmly. With the reunion? With everything? I strolled to the windows and looked out at the ocean, which I now owned. Now we do things differently. The reunion will happen, but under new management. Brandon questioned, what do you mean? Meaning, I've already booked the top floor of the Four Seasons for everyone. The beach house? Needs some private time with its new owner, I said, turning back to face them. You're kicking us out? Mom's voice broke. No, Mom, I'm showing you what it feels like to be excluded. The difference is I'm doing it with 5-star accommodations and an ocean view. Dad stood up. This time more slowly. We deserve that. All of it. But Vicky, are you sure this is what you want? What do I want? I asked each of them in turn. What I want is 20 years of missed birthdays and ignored accomplishments. What I want is an explanation for why I was never good enough. But since I can't have those things, I slid a stack of hotel reservations across the table. I'll settle for watching you all realize exactly what you missed out on. Cassie grabbed a reservation, gasping at the room description. This must have cost less than an hour of my new salary, I interrupted her. Consider it a parting gift before Hong Kong. How long? Mom inquired, her voice quiet. How long will you be gone? I grinned, remembering all the family gatherings I'd missed over the years. Long enough for you to understand what absence feels like. Now, shall we discuss those new reunion rules? The silence that followed was filled with 2 decades of regret, none of it mine. As my family checked into their apartments, the Four Seasons lobby was buzzing with activity. I stepped back, watching Cassie's children race about the marble columns as Brandon uncomfortably attempted to impress the concierge with small chat. Your car is ready, Miss Vicky? The valet approached with a subtle bow. Mom's head whipped around in response to his tone. I saw her eyes widen as she noticed my Bentley waiting outside. Vicky, she cried, hurrying over. We need to talk, properly talk. Actually, I have a meeting. I looked at my watch. The merger doesn't pause for family drama. Please. She touched my arm. It was the first physical interaction we'd had in years. Just coffee. 20 minutes. I examined her face, seeing fresh wrinkles around her eyes. Fine. The rooftop lounge, 15 minutes. Mom fidgeted with her coffee cup upstairs while I handled urgent Hong Kong-related emails. Eventually she spoke. I didn't know you were so accomplished. Clearly. I put down my phone. Though you never asked. We thought. She hesitated, looking for words. After you dropped out of law school. I didn't drop out, I stated firmly. I got accepted to business school instead. A full scholarship to Harvard. Which you'd know if you'd bothered to read any of my letters. Your father and I, we just wanted you to have a stable career. Like Cassie's law practice that she never actually started? Or Brandon's string of failed startups that you kept funding? Claire stepped in, stopping short as she noticed us. Oh, sorry. I can come back. No, stay. I motioned her over. Mom was just explaining why they never believed in me. Mrs. Brooks, Claire responded coolly. Long time no see. Though I guess you wouldn't remember me from all those holidays I spent with Vicky while you were at Cassie's house. Mom had the decency to appear embarrassed. Claire, of course I remember you. Save it. Claire sat down. I'm just here to finalize the Hong Kong details with Vicky. You know, for her massive promotion that you all ignored. My phone vibrated. Cassie. Mom? Okay. She seems upset. I responded back. She's fine. Learning some harsh realities. Vicky. Mom's voice was hardly audible. Were we really that terrible? Claire snorted, but I raised a hand. You weren't terrible, Mom. You were indifferent, which was worse. We can fix this, she begged. Now that you know I'm successful, I concluded. Now that I have money and power and influence? That's not fixing things. That's just changing your mind because I proved you wrong. The door opened again. Dad this time. Your mother's been gone a while. Oh, join us. I motioned to an empty chair. We're having a lovely chat about family dynamics. He sat heavily. Vicky, about the beach house. Already done, I interrupted him. The back taxes are paid, the liens are cleared, and the property is fully renovated. You're welcome. That's not, he began. Not what you meant, I said with a forced smile. No, it never is. Claire unlocked her laptop. Vicky, we need to finalize your Hong Kong housing allowance. They're offering 3 options. The penthouse at Victoria Harbour, I remarked without looking. I already decided. Mom's coffee cup rattled. Penthouse? Did you think international executives lived in studio apartments? Claire inquired pleasantly. My phone lit up with another text. Brandon. Tonight we're having a family supper. My reward. Can't. I responded. Board supper at Lerna Dan. Vicky, Dad leaned forward. We know we messed up, but pushing us away now, buying the beach house, moving to Hong Kong. Is this really the answer? I stood and smoothed my skirt. The beach house isn't about pushing you away. It's about taking control of something you never thought I deserved. As for Hong Kong, I cracked a joke. That's just good business. When will we see you? Mom's voice broke. I'll be back for the holidays. I gathered my belongings. Maybe, if I'm not too busy running my division. Claire stood behind me, her face triumphant. Don't worry, Mrs. Brooks, I'm sure Cassie will keep you updated on all the family news. She always has before. As we walked out, I heard Mom start crying. A part of me wanted to return and console her like I had always done, but that part was shrinking with each passing day. Are you okay? Claire inquired in the elevator. I checked my reflection in the mirrored walls and adjusted my fancy blazer. Never better? Ready for that board dinner? Born ready, she said with a smile. Though I have to ask, are you really going to make them stay at the hotel all reunion week? I smiled when the elevator doors opened. Oh, that's just the beginning. Wait until they see what I have planned for Christmas. The reunion dinner at the Four Seasons Ballroom turned out exactly how I had hoped. Crystal chandeliers gleamed overhead. String quartet melody drifted through the air. And my family sat at the main table, looking awkward in their business casual dress amidst the formal surroundings. Is this really necessary? Brandon asked, tugging on his borrowed tie. When I forgot to specify the dress code, the concierge supplied emergency formal clothing. You mean the 5-star catering? The premium open bar? The private balcony overlooking the ocean? I was sipping on champagne. Consider it making up for all those reunions I missed. Cassie's husband whistled when the waitresses brought the appetizers. This caviar is real beluga, isn't it? Only the best for the family. I grinned. Though I'm sure it's nothing compared to the sandwich platters you usually serve at reunions. Mom had not touched her supper. Vicky, can we talk privately? I brought her to the balcony where the ocean wind conveyed the aroma of salt and money. Behind us I could hear Cassie's children gushing at the chocolate fountain. This is cruel, Mom stated gently. Cruel. I turned to face her. Treating my family to luxury is cruel. You know what I mean, flaunting your success like this, the way you flaunted Cassie's law school graduation or Brandon's engagement party. I leaned on the guardrail. The parties I wasn't invited to. We were wrong, she muttered. Is that what you want to hear? What I want, I replied cautiously, is for you to realize exactly what you missed out on. Every promotion, achievement, every milestone you overlooked lead to this. Being able to book a whole hotel floor without blinking is a goal for me. The balcony door opened. Lance had come. Vicky. He nodded and turned to Mom. Mrs. Brooks, I'm Edward Sterling. I've been mentoring your daughter for the past decade. Mom's eyes widened. You're her boss, the one from the news. Actually, Lance smiled. As of next month, Vicky will be my equal in the corporate hierarchy, possibly even my superior given her trajectory. I watched Mom assimilate this knowledge, allowing the truth of my triumph to sink in. The Hong Kong position, she explained softly. It's really that significant, Mom. I laughed. I'll be running operations for half of Asia. My signing bonus alone could buy the beach house twice over. Lance checked his watch. Speaking of which, the Tokyo office is waiting for our call, shall we? I turned to Mom and said, of course. Enjoy the rest of dinner. The dessert course includes gold leaf. Try not to think about the cost. As we walked away, Lance muttered, brutal. I love it. Adrian had returned to the ballroom with a surprise, copies of tomorrow's Wall Street Journal, which included my face in the business section. Hot off the press, he stated, handing them out to my stunned family members. Thought you might want a souvenir of your daughter's success. Dad grabbed a copy with shaky hands. Global market leadership. Revolutionary approach to international commerce. Don't strain yourself, Dad, I said. The numbers might be a bit overwhelming for a small-town insurance agent. Cassie read aloud to her husband. Youngest executive to lead Asian operations projected to increase market share by 300% within 5 years. Vicky. Brandon stood up abruptly. Can I talk to you about a business opportunity? Sorry, little brother. I examined my phone. My investment portfolio is fully managed, but I hear there are some great entry-level positions at my company. The string quartet resumed playing as servers brought out the main course, Wagyu beef with truffle sauce. I saw my family strive to keep their cool amidst the luxury they never imagined their forgotten daughter could bring. The concierge stood at my elbow and said, Your car is ready for the Tokyo call. Thank you, Thomas. I handed him a $100 cash. Make sure my family gets anything they need. Of course, Miss Vicky. As I gathered my belongings, Mom grabbed my arm. When will you be back? From Hong Kong. I gazed around the ballroom at the splendor, my startled family, and the life I'd created without them. You know what, Mom? I'm not sure. But don't worry. I'll send pictures. Just like you all did with the reunion photos all these years. As I walked out, I heard Adrian make an announcement to the room. And wait until you hear about her new penthouse in Victoria Harbor. The sound of my heels on marble reverberated across the lobby. Each step took me away from the family who never believed in me and closer to the empire I'd created on their mistrust. Let them eat Wagyu, I reasoned, and choke on each golden bite. As I packed the rest of my belongings for Hong Kong, the morning sun cast a golden light on the beach home. Claire sat on my bed, assisting me in sorting through old photos I discovered in the attic. Take a look at this one, she said, holding out a faded picture. Your 10th birthday. You're the only one looking at the camera while everyone fawns over Cassie's new puppy. My remark was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mom stood at the doorway, holding a tiny wooden box. Can I come in? She quietly inquired. I nodded and continued to pack. She perched on the side of the bed and turned the box in her hands. I found this in our attic, she explained. It's everything I saved about you. Everything I was too proud to admit I kept. She opened the box. Inside were press articles, honor roll diplomas, and even the program from my MBA graduation, which they had skipped. You kept these? My hands remained still on a silk blouse. Every single one, she murmured. I told myself I was being practical, not encouraging pipe dreams. But really, I was scared. Scared of what? That you'd succeed where I failed. That you'd break free from the small-town life I settled for. She took out a business magazine from last year that included my name in a 30 under 40 list. And you did? Claire stood silently. I'll give you 2 a minute. No. I grabbed her arm. Stay. You're more family than most of them have been. My phone vibrated. Cassie. At the beach. Can we speak? Send her up. I texted back. Cassie emerged a few minutes later, appearing uneasy in the doorway. Brandon's here too, and Dad. We wanted to see you before you left. They filed in, forming a crowded audience in my bedroom. Brandon held a manila envelope. "What's that?" I asked, nodding toward it. "Investment proposals," he acknowledged. "But not for me. For the beach house. We've all contributed, if you'll let us." I raised an eyebrow. "I don't need your money." "We know," Dad said, stepping forward. "But we need to invest in something we should have invested in years ago. Our family." "Pretty words," I said. "But actions speak louder." "Then let our actions show you." Cassie took out her phone. "I've postponed my partnership acceptance, taking a sabbatical. Thought maybe I could visit you in Hong Kong. Really get to know my sister. And I've enrolled in business courses," Brandon continued. "Online classes. Thought maybe you could mentor me. Actually do it right this time." Mom opened her box once again, revealing one final item, a key. "We don't expect you to forgive us," she explained. "But maybe we can build something new, something better." I looked at the key. "What's this for?" "The front door," she said, her grin gloomy. "I kept it all these years, thinking it meant something. But you showed us what really matters isn't keys or houses or reunions. It's the people we choose to become." Claire held my hand while I took the key. "I'm still going to Hong Kong," I replied confidently. "We know," they said together. "And I'm still angry." "You should be," Dad confirmed. "And this doesn't fix everything." "Nothing could," Mom replied gently. "But maybe it's a start." I stepped to the window and looked out at the ocean. My ocean. Behind me, I could hear Brandon's papers rustling. Cassie breathes nervously. Mom's box of concealed pride. "The reunion," I concluded, "will alternate between here and Hong Kong. And you'll all need passports." The tension broke. Cassie giggled through tears. Brandon dropped his envelope. Dad needed to sit down. "Really?" Mom's voice was shaky. "Really?" I turned around to face them. "But not because you've earned it. Because I choose it. There's a difference." Claire grinned. "Does this mean I get to plan the Hong Kong reunion? Because I have ideas." "You're all going to learn Mandarin," I said. "And proper business etiquette. And how to navigate international markets." "Whatever it takes," Brandon replied. And for once, I believed him. My phone vibrated. "Lance. The car is here for the airport." "That's my cue." I took my carry-on. "Vicky." Mom stood. "Thank you. Not for the forgiveness we don't deserve, but for the chance we didn't earn." I looked at them all. My imperfect, suffering, and finally trying family. "Don't waste it." As I walked down to the waiting automobile, I could hear them following. I saw their reflections in the shiny black paint. They're no longer following me, but rather walking with me. Different, but feasible. "Hong Kong won't know what hit it," Claire said as she hugged me farewell. I smiled as I reflected on the vista from my new office, the family learning to speak my language, and the future extending like the horizon before us. "Neither will they," I answered, and climbed into the automobile. The beach home stood proudly behind us, no longer a symbol of isolation, but a link between who we were and who we may become. Not perfect but possible. My parents secretly stole the $35,000 inheritance my grandfather left for me and used it on my sister's wedding and education. So I consulted lawyers. I, the 22-year-old male, need to get this off my chest because I don't know what to do anymore. My parents, Laura, 48, and David, 50, have been lying to me about money that was supposed to be mine, and I only found out the truth last week. First, some background information. My grandfather on my mother's side died 3 years ago, when I was 19. He was essentially a second father to me because my father worked long hours when I was growing up. Grandpa Henry taught me to fish, assisted me with my homework, and always made sure I had all I needed for school. He wasn't wealthy, but he saved what he could. Grandpa Henry assured me before he died that he would leave me some money in his will. He said that it was not a fortune, but it would help me get started in life. He wanted me to use it for education or even as a down payment on a house someday. The actual amount was meant to be $35,000, which felt like a lot of money to me at the time. Following the funeral, my parents handled all legal matters. They claimed the probate process would take time and that I should not worry about it. I was grieving and going through my sophomore year of college, so I trusted them to take care of everything. They informed me that the funds would be held in a special account until I graduated. Fast forward to last year. I graduated from college with a degree in accounting and found a decent job at a small corporation. I moved back in with my parents to save money while searching for my own place. That's when I began to inquire about the inherited money more carefully. My parents always offered me different justifications when I brought it up. First, it was still mired in legal concerns. Then it was invested in something that could not be touched. Then my mother explained that there were tax issues that needed to be resolved. I became suspicious, but I didn't want to believe my own parents would lie to me about anything like this. The true difficulty began 6 months ago, when my sister Sophie, a 25-year-old female, became engaged to Ryan, a 26-year-old man. Sophie has always been my parents' favorite, despite their attempts to hide it. She received a car for her 16th birthday, whilst I had to work part-time jobs to save up for mine. She attended a nice private college, but I attended a state school and borrowed money. My parents always claimed they were teaching me responsibility, but Sophie never had to be accountable for anything. When Sophie announced her engagement, my parents immediately began discussing how they would pay for such a large wedding. They threw around figures like $40,000 and $50,000 as if they were nothing. I knew my father earned a solid living as a plant supervisor, but that kind of spending seemed well out of reach. My mother worked part-time in a doctor's office, so their combined annual income was approximately $75,000. I asked my father how they could afford such an expensive wedding, and he became defensive. He said they'd been saving for years, and it was none of my business how they spent their money. That stung because I was still living in their house, paying $400 a month in rent and buying my own groceries most of the time. The wedding planning process lasted several months. My parents were continually attending meetings with caterers, photographers, and event coordinators. Sophie chose this beautiful garment, which cost $3,000. The reception hall alone cost $15,000. Every week there was a new expense that my parents readily consented to cover. Meanwhile, I kept inquiring about my inheritance money because I wanted to begin looking for an apartment. The rent in our region had skyrocketed, and I needed the money for a security deposit and furniture. Every time I inquired, my parents became more furious with me. My father started accusing me of being greedy and impatient. My mother advised me to focus on developing my profession rather than worrying about money I hadn't earned. That comment concerned me because the money was my grandfather's, not theirs. He worked hard his entire life to ensure that I had it. However, whenever I tried to explain this, my parents acted as if I were being unreasonable. Sophie had her wedding 3 weeks ago. It was exactly the type of extravagant occasion my folks had planned. The sight was stunning, the food was costly, and there were more than 150 attendees. Sophie appeared joyful, and I attempted to be supportive despite my frustration with my own predicament. But something my Aunt Diane said at the reception got me thinking. She grabbed me aside and complimented my parents on their generosity in spending Henry's money on such a lovely wedding for Sophie. She stated Grandpa Henry would have enjoyed seeing his granddaughter so joyful on her special day. I wasn't sure what she meant at first. When I asked her to explain, she appeared puzzled. She claimed she assumed I was aware that my parents had used my inheritance money to pay for the wedding. She assumed I agreed to it as a gift for my sister. My stomach sank. I informed Aunt Diane I had no idea, and she realized she had said something inappropriate. She attempted to backtrack, but it was too late. She confirmed that my parents withdrew $35,000 from the account where my inheritance was housed and spent it on wedding expenditures. I spent the rest of the reception in a daze. I couldn't believe my parents would do something like this without first asking me. That money was explicitly left to me by my grandfather. They couldn't just spend family money as they wanted. When we arrived home that night, I faced my folks. I asked them directly if they had spent my inheritance money on Sophie's wedding. They initially tried to deny it, but when I mentioned what Aunt Diane had told me, they eventually accepted the reality. My mother burst into tears and explained that they had planned to repay me after Sophie's honeymoon. She stated they needed the money right away for wedding deposits, and they figured I wouldn't mind assisting my sister. My father was less apologetic. He stated that Sophie's wedding was more important than me finding an apartment right away, and that as a family, we should support one another. I inquired how they could make that decision without consulting me first. The money was not theirs to lend or give away. My father became enraged and told me that I was living in their house and barely contributing, therefore I should be grateful that they were managing my money appropriately. He stated spending it on Sophie's wedding was preferable to letting me waste it on an apartment that I couldn't truly afford anyway. That's when I understood they didn't mean to give me the money at all. They had always intended to use it for Sophie's wedding, and all of their reasons about legal and tax complications were nothing more than falsehoods to keep me quiet until after the wedding. I informed them that I needed my money back immediately. My mother explained that they no longer had it because it had been spent entirely on wedding expenditures. My father told me I was being selfish, that Sophie deserved a wonderful wedding after everything she had accomplished in her life. I questioned what I was supposed to have done that was less essential than Sophie's college degree and involvement. My father couldn't give me a straight answer. He just stated that Sophie had always been more responsible, and that they trusted her judgment more than mine. The talk concluded with my father informing me that if I didn't like how they handled things, I should find another place to live. My mother was still crying and promising to find a way to repay me someday, but she couldn't say when. I've been staying at my friend Jake's apartment for the past week as I decide out what to do. My parents have texted me a few times, indicating they want to talk, but I'm not sure what to say. They stole my inheritance money and spent it on my sister's wedding without my approval. They then lied to me about it for several months. Sophie called me yesterday, claiming she had no knowledge what had transpired. She claimed my parents told her they had saved up the money for her wedding, and she had no idea it was from my inheritance. She promised to repay me with the wedding gifts she and Ryan received, but it was only approximately $8,000 in cash and home stuff. I'm not sure whether I believe Sophie didn't know. She had to recognize that our parents couldn't afford a $45,000 wedding on their current income, but even if she didn't know, the damage had already been done. I've been thinking about speaking with a lawyer, but I'm not sure if I have any legal options. Despite the fact that the inherited money was meant to be held for me, it was in an account in my parents' names. I have no written agreement regarding when or how I was meant to receive it. My grandfather worked his entire life and saved that money just for me to have a better start than he did. My parents threw it away on Sophie's birthday, and now they're making me feel awful because I'm sad about it. I just need some guidance on what to do next. Should I try to work something out with my parents? Should I accept that they have shown me how much they appreciate me in comparison to Sophie? I can't afford to employ a lawyer on my current wage, and I'm not sure I want to sue my own family. But I can't get over the notion that they stared me in the eyes for months while lying to me about something so essential. How can I ever trust them again? Update 1. I can't believe how much support I received for my original post. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and shared similar experiences. I wish I had better news, but since my last post, things have become worse. After writing the first piece, I decided to attempt talking to my parents once again. I returned to their house when I knew Sophie would not be present, because I wanted to have an honest chat without her interfering. My mother answered the door and burst into tears as soon as she saw me. She continued expressing how sorry she was and how she never intended for things to become so messed up. My father was seated in his recliner, watching TV, and barely looked up as I entered. I sat down at the kitchen table with my mother and asked her to explain exactly what had happened to the money. She explained that after my grandfather died, the $35,000 was deposited into a joint account with both my parents and my names on it. The way things were set up, any of us could withdraw money without the other's approval. She stated that around 8 months ago, when Sophie became engaged, they began looking into wedding prices and discovered they couldn't afford what Sophie wanted. Sophie had her heart set on this particular venue and had previously paid a deposit with money she and Ryan had saved. But the remaining debt was far too much for my parents to handle. Sophie was growing anxious about having to cut back on her plans, so my father proposed they draw from my inheritance temporarily. The plan was that they would use the money for wedding deposits and then repay it before I needed it for an apartment. But then the wedding expenses continued rising. The catering bill was more than anticipated. Sophie decided she wanted live music rather than a DJ. The photographer's package was more pricey than they anticipated. My parents always convinced themselves that they would just borrow a bit more and figure out how to repay it later. By the time the wedding occurred, they had spent nearly the entire $35,000. My mother claimed she kept intending to tell me what was going on, but she was scared I'd become furious and want the money back right away. She figured if they could just get through the wedding, they'd have enough time to figure out a repayment plan. I asked her what this payback plan was intended to be, considering that they didn't have an extra $35,000 on hand. She admitted that they had not really thought it through. At that point, my father joined the conversation and stated that they hoped to repay me over time, perhaps $500 per month or so. I pointed out that at $500 per month, it would take them nearly 6 years to repay me, and that was assuming they could afford $500 a month on top of their usual expenses. My father became defensive and stated I should be more understanding of their financial condition. That's when I posed the question that had been bugging me the most. I questioned why Sophie's wedding was more important than the future my grandfather intended for me. My father stated Sophie worked well in college and deserved a great wedding. He stated I was only beginning out in my job and didn't need the money right away. I asked him why he was allowed to make that decision instead of me. That was my inheritance, not his. My grandfather left it to me particularly so that I may have possibilities that he never had. My father said that as parents, they knew what was best for the family as a whole. The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother repeatedly apologized and cried, but my father appeared to believe he had done nothing wrong. He claimed that families are supposed to help each other out, and that I was selfish for not wanting to contribute to Sophie's happiness. I informed them that I needed to view the bank statements for the account where my inheritance was housed. I wanted to know when the money was withdrawn and how it was used. My father declined, stating that it was none of my business because the account was also in their names. That's when I knew that talking to them wouldn't fix anything. They had made their decision, and they were not going to accept responsibility for it. I told them I needed time to think about what to do next and then departed. But the story does not stop there. My Aunt Diane phoned me 2 days following our talk. She stated she felt bad for accidentally revealing the truth at Sophie's wedding, and wanted to make sure I was aware of the entire scenario. It turns out that my grandfather discussed his plans for my inheritance with various family members prior to his death. He had expressly stated to Aunt Diane, my Uncle Frank, and my mother's sister Linda that the money was intended to assist me become established after college. He had even written a letter outlining his wishes, which my parents were intended to deliver to me along with the bequest. I never received a letter. When I asked my parents about it, my mother said she had no idea what I was talking about. Aunt Diane, on the other hand, claimed to have witnessed my grandfather handing over the letter to my parents at the hospital just before his death. Aunt Diane also said something that made my blood boil. Apparently my parents had been telling other family members that I was careless with money, which is why they had held on to my inheritance for so long. They warned me that if they gave it to me too soon, I'd waste it on dumb things. Several relatives had lauded my parents for their responsibility and concern for my best interests. My aunt claimed she never questioned it because my parents appeared to know what they were doing, and she figured they would give me the money when I was ready. She now recognized that my parents had been telling tales to justify holding my money while they planned how to spend it on Sophie. She was enraged, saying she hoped my grandfather was still alive to witness what they had done. The worst thing was that Sophie appeared to know more than she had previously revealed. Aunt Diane told me that at a family BBQ last summer, Sophie indicated to several people that our parents were helping her pay for the wedding using money from Grandpa Henry. She expressed gratitude that he was still able to participate to her special day, despite his absence. Sophie knew the money came from my grandfather, but she either didn't recognize it as my inheritance or didn't care. When I asked her about it, she said that she assumed the money was intended for me but didn't ask questions since she didn't want to make trouble. Sophie stated that she expected our parents to check with me before using the money, and when they did not express any problems, she assumed everything was all right. She stated she never meant to take anything away from me, and that she would go to any length to make things right. I asked her if she and Ryan would be willing to take out a loan to repay me the entire sum. Sophie said that they couldn't afford to take on so much debt right after getting married, especially because Ryan planned to return to school for his master's degree next year. She promised to give me the money from their wedding gifts again, but she stated it would take them years to save the rest. She offered that we work out a payment plan in which she and Ryan pay me back a small amount each month, along with whatever our parents could give. I told Sophie it wasn't good enough. My grandfather did not give me $35,000 with the intention of having me collect tiny payments from various family members over the next 5 years. He left me that money to spend whenever I needed it, which was right now. Sophie burst into tears, saying she never intended for all of this to happen. She stated that she loved me and did not want this circumstance to harm our relationship, but I informed her that the damage had already been done. She had benefited from money that was not hers, and now she was requesting that I take partial payments over several years rather than making it right away. I haven't communicated with my parents since our last conversation at their place. They've texted me multiple times wanting me to call them, but I don't see the point. They've made it obvious that Sophie's happiness comes first, even before my future or my grandfather's wishes. My mother left me a voicemail last week saying they had spoken with a financial consultant about taking out a home equity loan to repay me, but it would take several weeks to process and the interest rate would be quite high. She stated that they were willing to do whatever was necessary to repair our relationship. I'm not certain I believe them. They've already lied to me so many times that I can't believe anything they say. And even if they eventually repay me, it won't change the fact that they stole from me and lied about it for months. I've been staying with Jake and his roommates, but I can't do it indefinitely. I need to locate my own house, but without my inheritance money, I can't pay a security deposit and the first month's rent on anything nice. I'm practically back at square one, but now I don't have a family to rely on. Some individuals on my original post suggested I consult with a lawyer, so I did. The lawyer suggested I could have a case, but it would be expensive to pursue and the outcome was uncertain. Because the account was in both my parents' and my names, they had legal access to the funds, even though they weren't authorized to use it morally. The lawyer advised me that my best option would be to document everything and try to get my parents to admit in writing that they took the money without my authorization. Even so, a lawsuit would likely be more expensive than I could afford, and there is no assurance I would win. So I'm stuck. My parents took my inheritance. My sister benefited from it. And there isn't much I can lawfully do without spending money that I don't have. The saddest part is that they all keep telling me to get over it and go on with my life. But how am I expected to get over the reality that my own family was so unconcerned about my future that they would steal from me to pay for a party? How can I ever trust any of them again? Update 2. I need to update everyone on what's been going on because the situation has gotten even more convoluted. Some of you may recall that my parents mentioned that they were looking into a home equity loan to repay me. That fell through, but not for the reasons I anticipated. About 3 weeks ago, I received a call from my Uncle Frank, my father's brother. He claimed he needed to talk to me about something crucial regarding my grandfather's estate. I hoped he had discovered new facts that could assist me in recouping my losses. We met at a cafe near his workplace, and what he told me dramatically altered what I thought I understood about the situation. It turns out that my grandfather had planned more than just a $35,000 inheritance for me. Uncle Frank revealed that about 5 years before his death, my grandfather began placing money into a separate investment account designated for my schooling and future. This was in addition to the $35,000 he was scheduled to get from his normal savings. My grandfather's investing account had grown to about $60,000 by the time he died. The intention was that the $35,000 from his savings would be accessible to me immediately after graduation to assist me get started, while the investment money would be retained until I was 25 or married, whichever came first. My grandfather had informed Uncle Frank of this arrangement and urged him to ensure that everything was handled appropriately. But this is what made me sick to my stomach. My parents were aware of both accounts. They were meant to tell me about the investing account when I reached 25, which is 3 years away. But according to Uncle Frank, they had also been withdrawing money from that account. Uncle Frank stated that he had been receiving quarterly statements to his address since my grandfather preferred that someone other than my parents manage the investment account. When he reviewed the most current statement, he noted that there had been multiple substantial withdrawals during the previous 2 years. The account, which should have held nearly $60,000, suddenly contained less than $15,000. Uncle Frank confronted my parents about the missing money, and they acknowledged to using it to cover a variety of bills, including a portion of Sophie's wedding costs. I couldn't believe what I heard. Not only had my parents taken the $35,000 that was supposed to be mine right away, but they had also been taking from a larger account designated for my future. In total, they had taken nearly $80,000 that my grandfather had set aside specifically for me. Uncle Frank admitted that he regretted not paying closer attention to the account. He had trusted my parents to handle everything properly and merely examined the statements on occasion. He claimed if he had known what was going on, he would have intervened much sooner. When I contacted Uncle Frank about my legal possibilities, he stated it was tricky because my parents were named as trustees on the investment account. Technically, they had the ability to remove funds, but they were supposed to work in my best interests and in accordance with my grandfather's intentions. Uncle Frank stated that he had copies of all of the original documents my grandfather had signed when he established the accounts. There was a clear paper trail indicating that both accounts were meant for my benefit, not normal family costs or my sister's wedding. He promised to help me find a lawyer who would operate on a contingency fee basis, which meant I wouldn't have to pay until we won the case. He suggested the proof was sufficient enough that we might be able to recover not only the stolen funds, but also any interest or investment gains I had lost. All of this new information overwhelmed me, but it also made me angrier than I had ever been. My parents had not merely made a wrong judgment with my $35,000 inheritance. They had been steadily taking from me for years, lying to my face about it. I resolved to address them once more before contacting lawyers. I went to their residence with Uncle Frank and insisted that they explain how much money they had taken and how they had spent it. The conversation was nasty. Initially, my parents denied that they had touched the investment account. However, when Uncle Frank showed them the bank statements, they couldn't continue lying. My mother broke down and acknowledged that they had been withdrawing money from the investment account for nearly 2 years. She claimed it began when my father's hours were reduced at work, and they were having difficulty paying their mortgage. They promised themselves they'd repay it when things went better financially. However, instead of reducing their expenses or increasing their income, they continued to take more money as needed. They used it to pay for Sophie's senior year of college, a new roof for their home, and other costs. They were already too far into their relationship by the time Sophie proposed. My dad apologized less than my mother. He claimed they had made years of sacrifices to raise me and Sophie, and they deserved to benefit from my grandfather's money as well. He stated my grandfather would have wanted them to spend the money to keep the family secure and Sophie successful in life. That was when I lost it. I informed my father that he was a thief and a liar, and that he had no right to make judgments about money that was not his. My grandfather had trusted them to carry out his desires, but they had entirely broken that trust. My father was furious, accusing me of being disrespectful and ungrateful. He said they had done their best to raise me and Sophie, and I should be grateful for everything they had sacrificed for our family. He accused me of acting like a spoiled brat who believed he was entitled to everything. Uncle Frank stepped in at that point and told my father to stop talking. He claimed my parents had taken nearly $80,000 from their own son and had no right to behave as victims. He gave them 48 hours to come up with a plan to repay every dime, or he would assist me in taking them to court. My mother implored us not to involve lawyers. She claimed it would destroy the family, and Sophie did not deserve to have her marriage damaged by legal issues. She offered to find a way to repay me if I gave them some time. But I was finished giving them time. They had had years to do the right thing, but they decided to continue taking from me while making me feel bad for asking about my own money. I informed them that they had till the end of the week to move the remaining $15,000 from the investment account to an account with simply my name on it. I also requested a formal payment plan for the remaining $65,000 they had taken, with a schedule that did not span decades. My father stated that they could not raise so much money in such a short period of time. He stated that their house was already fully mortgaged and they were ineligible for any additional loans. He accused me of wanting to destroy their lives for money. I told him he had already ruined my life by snatching my future. The money my grandfather had saved was supposed to provide me with chances and security, but they had spent it on things that benefited themselves and Sophie instead. My parents finished the talk by claiming they needed time to think out what to do. Uncle Frank and I left, but not before he informed them that he would be monitoring all of my grandfather's remaining accounts to ensure that no more money was taken. That was 1 week ago. Sophie texted me yesterday, saying she and Ryan had decided to sell some of their wedding gifts and use their honeymoon savings to pay me back faster. She estimated that they could raise $15,000 immediately, and another $10,000 over the next 3 to 4 months. It's something, but not nearly enough to cover the total sum my parents took. And I'm not sure why Sophie and Ryan should have to give up their honeymoon and wedding gifts to rectify something my parents did. I haven't decided whether to accept Sophie's offer or insist on my parents figuring out how to repay me themselves. Part of me believes Sophie should accept some responsibility because she profited from the stolen money, but another part of me feels horrible that she's attempting to mend something she didn't cause. Uncle Frank found me a lawyer who will take the case on contingency. We have a meeting arranged for next week to review all of the materials and determine the best course of action. The lawyer believes we have a solid case, but she warns me that family cases can be very unpleasant and expensive. She explained that even if we win, there is no assurance that my parents will be able to pay the judgment. If they don't have enough assets to cover what they owe me, I may end up with a piece of paper stating that they owe me money but no manner of collecting it. I'm preparing myself for the potential that I'll never get my money back, regardless of what the courts decide. However, at this point, it is no longer just about money. It's about holding my parents accountable for their actions and ensuring they don't harm anyone else in the family. My grandfather worked his entire life and saved every dime he could so that I could have the possibilities he never had. My parents spent that present on themselves while lying to me for years. Even if I never see that money again, I cannot let them get away with what they did. Update 3. This will be my final update because the situation has reached a stage where I need to go on with my life, rather than always reflecting on what my parents did to me. The appointment with the lawyer went better than I anticipated. After going over all of the records Uncle Frank had collected, she was convinced we could win a lawsuit against my parents. The paper trail plainly demonstrated that my grandfather intended both accounts to benefit me, and my parents had broken their obligations as trustees by diverting the funds for personal gain. However, she did confirm what I had already assumed. Even if we won the court case, collecting the money would be practically impossible. After years of refinancing and taking out home equity loans, my parents' house has almost no equity. My father's job at the plant does not provide enough income to satisfy a significant judgment payment, and my mother's part-time employment barely pays her own needs. The lawyer estimated that legal fees would be about $20,000, even on a contingency basis, and we could end up paying more than we could ever recoup. She said the optimum conclusion would be a settlement in which my parents agreed to repay me over a lengthy period of time, but there was no guarantee they would be able to make those payments. After deliberating for a few days, I decided not to continue the lawsuit. I recognized that chasing my parents through court would not get me my money back and would only add to the stress and turmoil for everyone concerned. Uncle Frank expressed disappointment, but claimed he understood my decision. Instead, I resolved to concentrate on what I could actually influence. I utilized the remaining $15,000 in the investment account as a down payment on a tiny apartment across town. It isn't fancy, but it's mine, and I don't have to rely on others to provide a roof over my head. Sophie and Ryan ended up giving me approximately $12,000 after selling some of their wedding gifts and utilizing money they had saved for their honeymoon. I didn't ask them to do it, but Sophie said she couldn't appreciate the things because they were paid for with money that should have been mine. I was grateful, but it also saddened me that my sister felt responsible for correcting something our parents had done. My parents attempted to contact me several times after Uncle Frank and I confronted them. They wrote me long text messages apologizing and promising to find a way to repay me someday. My mother contacted me in tears, pleading with me to give them another chance to make things right. But I learned that their apologies were meaningless unless they were accompanied by meaningful behavior adjustments. They were sorry they were caught, but not enough to make genuine sacrifices to undo what they had done. If they had been willing to sell their home or take dramatic measures to repay me, I might have felt differently. Instead, they kept making excuses for why they couldn't come up with the money, expecting me to be sympathetic and patient. They wanted me to accept their apologies and continue our relationship without them genuinely repairing the damage they had done. I stopped replying to their texts approximately 3 weeks ago. I didn't make a big deal about going no contact or cutting them off permanently. I basically stopped responding to their attempts to communicate. They eventually quit trying. The most difficult thing has been dealing with other family members who think I'm being too harsh. A few relatives have advised me that family is more important than money and that I should forgive my parents for their mistakes. They act as if my parents accidentally spent a few $100s, rather than systematically stole about $80,000 over several years. Aunt Diane and Uncle Frank have supported my decision, but some family members have expressed concern that my grandfather would be dismayed to see the family squabbling over money. That upsets me since my grandfather would not be disappointed in me for advocating for myself. He would be upset in my parents for breaking their trust and stealing from their own kid. Sophie and I have managed to retain a relationship, but it has changed with time. She's been trying to act as if everything is normal between us, but I believe she feels bad about the whole incident. We text occasionally and have had coffee together, but we no longer discuss our parents or money. Ryan appears uncomfortable with me now, which I understand. He is married to Sophie, therefore he is unintentionally caught up in this family turmoil. I don't blame him for anything that happened, but I don't expect him to take sides against his new wife's family. Work has been going well, and I've been working extra hours whenever they're available. I'm saving money more aggressively now since I know I can't rely on others to help me create my future. It's not the way I had hoped to begin adulthood, but at least I know I'm doing it my way. I occasionally think of my grandfather and wonder what he would say about all of this. I like to think he'd be proud of me for sticking up for myself and refusing to allow my folks walk all over me. He constantly told me that a person's character is revealed via how they treat others when no one is looking. My parents revealed their true character when they believed they could get away with stealing from me. The $27,000 I was able to collect is not the $80,000 my grandfather intended for me to have, but it is something. More importantly, I realize that I am stronger than I thought I was, and that I do not require my parents' approval or support to succeed in life. I'm not saying I'll never talk with my parents again, but whatever future relationship we may have will be on my terms. They betrayed my trust in the worst way possible, and they have showed no genuine commitment to regaining it. Until that changes, and if it does, I'm better off without them in my life. Some may see that as cold or unforgiving, but I don't. I'm simply protecting myself from those who have already demonstrated their willingness to lie to and steal from me when it suits them. That is not the type of relationship I want with anyone, family or not. I'm 22 years old, and I'm starting anew without the financial assistance my grandfather desired. It's going to be more difficult than it should have been, but at least I'm doing it honestly, and I can sleep at night knowing I haven't damaged anyone else in order to advance. This is more than I can say about my parents. I was left to rot at 12, erased for 18 years. At my brother's perfect wedding, I shattered their lies and rose with a voice they couldn't silence. The room fell silent when I raised the microphone. Dozens of eyes fixed on me, confused whispers rippled across the hall. My parents froze mid-sip. Adrian's jaw tightened. I held up a faded photo of a 12-year-old boy abandoned at a gas station and said, "This was me. This is what family looked like when they drove away and never came back." Gasps broke through the silence. Emily blinked, bewildered. My mother's lips parted as if she wanted to stop me, but nothing came out, and in that instant, on the night of my brother's perfect wedding, everything they had buried for 18 years clawed its way back into the light. My name is Ethan, and I am now 30. Some memories, however, fester rather than vanish. Get sharper over time. I don't discuss my childhood much. Not because I forgot, but because saying it aloud makes it feel more true. I feel like I'm 12 years old again, standing in the middle of that gas station parking lot. I was clutching a candy bar that I didn't have enough money to buy. Watching my parents' taillights fade into the night. It happened in August, just before school began. We'd been on one of those awful family bonding excursions that my mother believed we needed. Except that connecting in our house meant pretending my father's rants were wise. And my older brother Adrian's every mediocre thought was a blessing to humanity. I was the quiet one, overly sensitive, soft-spoken, and usually in the way. On that particular day, I had spilled a Sprite in the back seat. Adrian, who was 16 and already an expert at deflecting blame, smirked and added, "I did it on purpose." Dad pulled over at the next petrol station off the highway, his eyes burning. "You're not a baby anymore," he exclaimed. "You want to act grown? You can figure your own way home." At first I laughed. I assumed it was one of his twisted jokes. But then the back of the SUV banged shut, and they simply drove. I raced after them for a second, crying out their names, but my voice cracked and vanished under the roar of motors and tires. A clerk stuck his head out of the gas station door, cigarette dangling from his lips, and looked at me as if I were just another stray who had been abandoned. That night, I slept beneath the station's garbage, cuddled up against myself, my heart beating with each passing car. I recall counting the hours. 80 miles from home. No money, no phone, no one to call. When I begged for aid, the clerk refused. He murmured, "Ain't a daycare kid." I did not cry. I believe a part of me froze that night, the portion that believed family meant anything permanent. The next morning, I found a payphone and called Mrs. Grace, a teacher I trusted. She was the one that picked me up and drove me back into town. I explained to her that my parents must have forgotten about me. She did not believe it. I could feel she increased her grasp on the steering wheel, but she did not press. She simply dropped me off, ensured I had food, and assured me I could always call her. Nobody seemed surprised as I walked through our house's front door. No one apologized. Mom looked up from her laptop and remarked, "Took you long enough." Adrian was on the couch, playing video games, and muttered, "Should have walked faster." Dad never acknowledged it happened. The next morning at breakfast, he simply nodded at me as if everything were usual. That was the day I quit trying to fit in. I graduated high school like a ghost in the hall. Ate lunch alone and studied in silence. I left as soon as I reached 18, worked 3 jobs, completed community college, and then moved to a university across the nation without informing anyone. I changed my phone number, never left a forwarding address, and for the first time began breathing on my own. I've spent the last decade developing a life they don't know about. I became a software engineer. I moved to a city where no one ever repeated the words, "man up," as if they were a remedy for trauma. My friends describe me as grounded and loyal. I even got a rescue dog named Shadow, a frightened little mutt who flinches at loud noises. We understand one another. I never expected to hear from them again, yet last week a letter arrived at my flat. There was no return address, but the calligraphy on the front was obviously Mom's, loopy and dramatic. I gingerly opened it, partly anticipating a legal threat or another passive hostile note about leaving the family. But it was a thick envelope. Inside, Adrian's wedding invitation was embossed in gold letters, all ostentatious and formal, the kind of thing that screamed borrowed grandeur and artificial smiles. Tucked within was a folded piece of notebook paper, penned by them. "Ethan, we understand that our relationship has been strained, but Adrian is getting married and your presence would be greatly appreciated by the family. He requested that we contact out to you directly. We hope you will come. We would love to reconnect. Mom and Dad are reaching out as if nothing has occurred, like they hadn't abandoned me to rot beneath a gas station dumpster when I was 12 and never apologized. Like Adrian wasn't the golden kid whose shadow I was never permitted to escape." I sat there looking at the note for a long time. My fingers clenched on the paper's edge, causing it to wrinkle, and for a brief time I considered throwing it away. Almost. But then something inside me paused. I flipped the invitation over. Fancy setting, outdoor ceremony, dress code, formal. There was even a QR code for RSVPs. As if I were simply another distant relative. As if they hadn't already taught me the meaning of disposability. I looked at the note again. It would be very important to the family. Interesting, because I wasn't the same kid they dumped on the side of the road anymore, and if they wanted me back in the picture, I had a few suggestions about how to frame it. Let's just say I didn't immediately RSVP. But I did begin plotting quietly and methodically, as I always do. Because certain debts are not paid in words, but in person. Sometimes simply turning there is the loudest thing you can do. The instant I saw Adrian's fiancée's name, Charlotte Kensington, emblazoned in embossed cursive on the invitation, I knew what kind of wedding it would be. Upper middle class perfection, long games, a live quartet, and bespoke cocktail napkins with their initials. The Kensingtons were local nobility in my area, old money, gossip and grudges. Emily was someone I faintly recalled from school, always dressed like she was going to church or a job interview, even at the age of 15. The kind of girl who never had to compete for attention since it was bestowed upon her like an inheritance. So Adrian landed her. Of course he did. The charming oldest son, quarterback smile, parents who surrounded him as if he were their kid. My parents most likely wore their approval like jewelry. I searched her up online the same night. She was everything you expected. Dental school graduate. I curated Instagram with encouraging messages and cappuccino art. Engagement shots taken under a tree that appeared to have come from a wedding magazine. One post's tags contained a link to their wedding webpage. I clicked it. Welcome to Adrian and Emily's special day. The countdown is 3 weeks. Location, Stonebrook Vineyard and Lodge. Bloomingdale's Crate and Barrel and Amazon are among the registry options. Dress code. Black tie is optional. Please arrive 30 minutes before the ceremony starts. Shuttle transportation is offered from the guest hotel. We are very happy to celebrate with friends and family. Family, correct? There was even a section called The Love Story. Adrian wrote it himself, or at least from his perspective. It all read like it was written by a public relations agency. I've always been the type of man who believes in fate. However, nothing prepared me for Emily. Her grace, her kindness, the way she looked at me and saw more than the person I used to be. You've grown into a different person than you were before. I read the line 3 times, and then I remembered him as he once was. A bully wearing khakis. A liar wearing a halo. The same lad who shoved me into a pond at my 12th birthday party and informed our parents that I had slipped. I had to walk home, drenched, while everyone else ate cake. They'd been laughing about it for years. I wasn't planning on attending the wedding. Not until I saw that line. Because Adrian was rewriting his own past, believing there was no collateral damage on his way to adulthood. And suddenly the individuals who abandoned me were literally calling me family again. I did not RSVP online. That would have been too easy. Instead I asked an old college buddy, Jenny, who now works in logistics, to send me a high-end formal suit in midnight blue, custom fit, with a vest that looked like it belonged in a James Bond movie. I even reserved a room at the same premium guest hotel advertised on the website, paying up ahead and using a slightly different name. I didn't want them to know I was coming. Not yet. I reasoned if they were going to try to pretend the past did not exist, I'd give them a taste of their own medicine. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sent one email to the RSVP address supplied. It was Emily's response. Looking forward to the celebration. Please don't mention I'm attending. I'd like to surprise the happy couple. Ethan. There was no reply, but it was marked as read. In the week coming up to the wedding, I cleared my schedule, hired a sitter for my dog Shadow, and packed lightly. Just the suit, a pair of polished shoes, and an old folded and weathered photo of me at 12 years old standing outside that gas station with a rucksack and a blank expression. Mrs. Grace had removed it the morning she took me up. She printed it years later and mailed it to me with the simple message, "You survived." I hadn't decided what I was going to do with it yet, but it felt natural to bring it. When I arrived at the vineyard the day before the wedding, it looked like a movie set. Rolling hills, polished wooden beams, fairy lights strung through archways, wonderful weather, and ideal people. Every aspect was planned to convey warmth and elegance, but in a way that excluded people like me by design. The rehearsal supper was in full swing. I watched from a quiet corner of the outdoor patio, sunglasses on and a suit jacket draped over my arm. Nobody saw me at first, but then I saw her. Mom. She was thinner than I remembered, like a balloon that had gradually deflated but attempted to preserve its shape. Her hair was tinted a darker brown, almost reddish, and she wore a pearl necklace that contrasted with her sunburned neck. She was laughing, with that loud, brittle laugh that always sounded like she was trying to convince everyone she was okay. Dad was standing beside her, wearing a blazer that most likely still had the same money clip in its inside pocket. He used to flick it open theatrically whenever he wanted to remind us of the service he was delivering. His face seemed puffier than I remembered, as if life had finally pushed back. They were talking to Emily's parents, smiling, shaking hands, and complimenting Adrian in the same saccharine tone that used to make my skin crawl. I did not approach them. Not yet. But then Adrian turned, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades we locked eyes, and his expression fell. Not enough to warn anyone else, but I noticed it. The flicker, the unspoken, "What is he doing here?" that passed over his neatly groomed face. He raised a glass to me, hesitated, and then immediately looked away, as if he hadn't noticed me at all. But I knew he did. More significantly, I realized he hadn't informed them that I was on my way. I snuck out before the toast and walked back to the motel, my heart pumping with adrenaline. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. They'd asked me to come. They wanted me to rejoin the family. I was going to show them what that meant, and I hadn't even spoken yet. The wedding morning arrived, misty and tense. I stood at my hotel room's floor-length window, watching fog sweep across the wine hills like a scene from a movie. I barely slept. Not from nerves. I wasn't nervous, just remembering. My thoughts replayed everything like a silent movie. Cold pavement behind the gas station. Mrs. Grace's expression when she pulled up. When I arrived home, I found silence. I ironed my shirt carefully and painstakingly, pressing out each crease as if it were a scar that I might flatten. Then I reached for an old photograph. Folded and fading. 12-year-old me stared into the horizon, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. I tucked it into my breast pocket, behind a silk square near to my chest. The bus to the vineyard was packed with passengers who did not know me. Distant cousins, former neighbors, and Emily's college classmates. Everyone talked on the venue, the vista, and the attire. Nobody looked my way. I preferred it that way. When I stepped off the shuttle, the surroundings had changed. White chairs spread out across the grass like dominoes. A floral arch took center stage, adorned with ivory roses and pastel greenery. Classical music filled the air, as waiters carried around glasses of Prosecco as if it were liquid gold. It was really amazing. I kept to the back. I saw them again. My parents are now seated in the front row, smiling at guests and shaking hands with the officiant. Dad laughed too loudly. Mom held a bouquet of white lilies that did not fit her at all. Adrian stood off to the side in a fitted tuxedo, speaking to someone I guessed was his best man. Emily, however, had yet to show. That's when it occurred. An older woman approached me, with exquisite silver hair and a navy blue clothing. She glanced at me for a moment before smiling graciously. "You must be Ethan." I blinked. "I am. I'm Catherine Kensington, Emily's mother." "Of course." I straightened a little and extended my hand. She accepted it with elegance but also something else. Curiosity. "Adrian said you might be here. I just wanted to say, thank you for coming." My guard went up immediately. "He said I might come." She nodded, her smile growing tighter. He admitted there had been some disconnect, but he thought this was a beginning toward mending. I could have laughed, but I did not. Instead, I said, "He's an optimist." She smiled again, but more awkwardly this time. "In any case, welcome, and please let me know if you have any questions." I saw her go away, her heels biting slightly into the grass. So Adrian informed Emily's family, but not mine. Interesting. The ceremony began like any other. Gentle music played, guests shifted in their chairs. The officiant cleared his throat, and Emily arrived, shining and flawless precisely as you'd expect. The crowd's combined breath inhaled and held. She walked down the aisle to gentle applause. Adrian waited under the arch like a prince accepting his crown, while I watched from the back row, mute. The ceremony was quick, with typical vows and uneasy laughs. I do exchange like currency. Then came the announcement, the kiss, and the applause. And with that, they were married. The reception was where everything started to unravel. It was hosted in a vast glass-walled hall that overlooked the vineyard. Chandeliers hang like frozen waterfalls. Every table had a centerpiece of orchids and floating candles. Guests were escorted to their seats using printed calligraphy cards. Mine did not exist. I calmly approached the table where my folks sat. There's an empty chair near them. The name card is designated for the family. I hovered. Mom's gaze fell on me. "Oh, you did it," she murmured, sipping wine and barely even standing. "Apparently," I said. Dad did not speak. He glanced at me with an unreadable expression and leaned back slightly, as if I were a question he didn't want to answer. I answered calmly, "I don't see a seat card for me." Mom shrugged. "It must have been a mistake. Perhaps you are at one of the other tables. We did not handle the seating arrangements." "Sure, you did not." I looked around. Tables were almost filled. Laughter came from all directions. And then I noticed Adrian across the floor, engaged in conversation with Emily and two older gentlemen in tuxedos. He saw me. He did not smile. Instead, he walked straight for me. "Hey," he murmured, his voice low. "Glad you could make it." "No thanks to you," I said. He exhaled. "Listen, I didn't think you'd actually come, but you invited me. I requested Mom and Dad to invite you." "That's different." My jaw clenched. "I assumed you'd see the invitation, dismiss it, and move on as you normally do," he continued. I looked at him, tanned, styled, and confident. A man who had never actually paid for anything in blood or silence. "I came to check if he remembered," I explained quietly. "Remember what?" I didn't respond. I reached into my jacket and took out the photograph. I held it up and let it speak. His expression changed, slight but real. Eyes flew to the photo, then to my face, then back. He swallowed. "That happened years ago." "Yes," I answered. "You never spoke a word. Never instructed them to turn back. Never checked to see whether I got it home safely." He peered around as if someone could listen. "Ethan, that was an awful night. You were dramatic even then. I thought you were past it. I am over it." Something within of me stilled. "I am not here to spoil your wedding." I said, "You can relax." He offered a short, lifeless laugh. "Good, but I'm staying until the speeches." He looked at me again, as if unsure whether I was bluffing. I wasn't, since the best revenge is quiet. It is a surgical procedure, and I had prepared a toast that they would never forget. The lights in the ballroom dimmed as servers cleaned the last of the dinner plates. Guests were buzzing in a champagne haze, some leaning back with full stomachs and others dancing in nice little circles to a four-piece jazz band tucked away in the corner. Adrian and Emily sat at a long head table, their names written in gold writing behind them. Everything shined, including the wine glasses, cutlery, and people. A man wearing a powder blue suit clinked his glass. The room became quiet. "It's time for some comments from those who know the bride and husband best." There was polite applause, and Emily's father rose to speak first. His voice was smooth and practiced, a combination of wealth and warmth. He discussed Emily's childhood, her dreams, and the first time she addressed Adrian. He even joked that Adrian was so lovely that we didn't notice he was trying to marry up. Everyone laughed. The best man, Adrian's college roommate, then took over, keeping things light and amusing. Something about frat parties, Adrian's inability to cook, and how fortunate he was to have met Emily. It was the type of speech you'd expect. A little heart, a little comedy, and no rough edges. The MC then took the microphone again and looked down at a list. Finally, Ethan proposes a unique toast. The room became quiet. Everything shifted. My folks froze in the middle of their meal. Adrian's jaw stiffened. Emily blinked in uncertainty, so I stood up. I moved slowly to the microphone, ignoring the uneasy shifting around me. Several visitors whispered. Some people appeared puzzled. Others just looked, confused who I was or why I was speaking. I tapped the microphone once. It rang throughout the room. "Good evening," I said with a firm voice. "I'm Ethan, Adrian's younger brother." Several heads turned sharply now. The words landed like a ripple on quiet water. I could practically hear murmurs start to circulate. "He has a brother?" "I wasn't sure if I was going to come tonight," I continued. "In fact, I'd been debating whether I should for the past few weeks. You see, I haven't spoken with my family in 18 years. Silence. Not the good type. The kind that draws the air out of the room. I received a wedding invitation out of nowhere. There was no phone call or email, just a card and a note saying, "It would mean a lot to the family if you arrived." I let the words rest before pulling the photo from my pocket. This is me at 12 years old. I held it up with 2 fingers, and guests craned their necks to see. This was taken the morning after my parents left me at a gas station 80 meters from home. I had spilled a beverage in the car, and instead of punishing me, they left, telling me to man up and sort it out. The throng shuffled, with uneasy stares and the gentle sound of a wine glass being laid down. They did not return and did not call. I slept beneath a dumpster, and the only reason I got home was because a teacher picked me up the next day. I never received an apology from my parents or Adrian, and until this wedding invitation arrived, I assumed they were all perfectly happy pretending I didn't exist. I looked at my parents. Dad's face was pale and Mom's mouth hung slightly open, as if she was trying to produce a response but couldn't find one quickly enough. "Now, I'm not here to ruin anyone's evening," I remarked. "Emily, you seem nice. Your family has been warm and friendly. Adrian, you've always been able to put on a good face." That remark hit hard, and his expression cracked for a brief moment. But I believe that weddings are about honesty and truth, and it wouldn't be honest if I stood here tonight pretending that we were ever close or that I grew up in a household where family meant protection rather than survival. The room was suddenly very silent, with people hardly breathing. I was invited to this wedding to be a part of a picture-perfect day, a brother-shaped placeholder, and I looked back at Adrian. "So consider this my gift to you." I placed the photograph on the head table in front of him as a reminder of what family looks like when you turn your back on it. Then I carefully turned away from the microphone, leaving startled quiet and a few audible gasps. And as I walked past my parents' table, I heard my mother hiss my name in a barely audible whisper, and my father began to stand, but I didn't stop or glance back. I departed via the side of the hall and walked out into the chilly night, leaving the music behind me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shaking. I was free. But freedom is a curious thing. It doesn't always bring calm straight away. Sometimes it just leaves a silence, leaving you wondering what comes next. I had made my move, but the consequences were still coming. The trip back to the hotel was quiet. There was no jazz band, no clinking glasses, no theatrical laughing booming off marble walls, just the buzz of tires on gravel and the low whir of my thoughts catching up with me. I didn't immediately return to my room. Instead, I went for a walk along one of the vineyard trails behind the hotel, snaking between rows of dark grapevines beneath a starry sky. With each step I moved away from that wedding hall, the tension in my chest loosened. I could still hear my mother's piercing scream, see Adrian's beautifully prepared face crumble in real time, and sense the puzzled eyes of people attempting to connect that had been purposefully removed from the family photo. For most of my life, I thought I was a ghost in my own family. Nevertheless, tonight, I reminded them that I was flesh and blood and memories. And memory is a hazardous thing, especially when those around you depend on forgetting. I returned to the hotel to find a voicemail from an unknown number. "Ethan, this is Emily." Her voice was low, calm, but harsh. "I'm not sure what I expected, but it wasn't it. I wish someone had told me. I just wanted you to know that I'm not furious at you for saying what you did. You deserved it, and I apologize." She hung up without leaving me a number to call back. That was the first apology I'd had in 18 years, and it wasn't from my family. I departed early the next morning. No breakfast, no lengthy goodbyes, just a quick email to the front desk requesting that they cancel the remainder of my reservation and send me the final payment. I didn't want to wait around to see what occurred since I knew my parents and Adrian would either deny it happened or try to spin it as a misunderstanding, or both. But I knew the photograph was still on the head table when I departed. I kept the suit, threw away the tie, and went home. But once I was truly home, in my modest apartment, where Shadow welcomed me with enthusiastic barks and a wagging tail, something unexpected occurred. People began reaching out. First, my cousin Sophie messaged me on LinkedIn, saying she'd heard about the speech from someone at the wedding and wanted to apologize for never inquiring where I went after I went missing. She said she always felt it was strange that no one ever mentioned me again, but she assumed it was her responsibility not to question. We talked for a while, and she asked if she could come visit. I didn't say yes, but I also didn't say no. Mrs. Grace sent a message, stating that she remembered and still had the photo she had taken. "I always wondered what happened to you," she wrote. "Ethan, I am so proud of you. I hadn't sobbed in years, but I did that night. It was a silent, agonizing relief, like when you've been holding your breath for too long and finally exhale. I started sleeping better and waking up earlier. I discovered a new rhythm. My job felt simpler, my code cleaner. I took Shadow for longer walks, and I started writing again. Short tales, essays, anything to channel the chaos in my head into something coherent. A week later, I received an email from a woman who worked at a nonprofit for troubled adults. The children had been cut off, dropped, or abandoned. She'd learned about the wedding speech from a friend of a friend who worked the event, and she felt it was the most quietly powerful thing she'd ever heard. She asked whether I would be willing to speak at one of their private retreats, not as a motivational speaker, but as someone who had experienced it. I said yes, and that one event evolved into 2, then 4, followed by an offer to speak on a panel at a university conference about family estrangement and trauma rehabilitation. I didn't wear the suit to those. Instead, I wore a basic shirt, trousers, and on occasion, a blazer to look more polished. But I always carried the photo and would show it when I spoke, telling the tale precisely as it happened, with no embellishments, just the truth. And every time someone approached me later and said, "That happened to me as well," I was not alone. I'd never been. My voice, which they had previously described as too soft, sensitive and quiet, had finally found its volume. It wasn't vengeance, at least not yet, but rather power. And with each person I assisted, each tale I heard, and each hand I shook, I felt it grow. Not the fury, but the clarity, the confidence. Because although Adrian returned to his new wife and polished reputation, he was unaware of the ripple I had caused or the knowledge that I was far from finished. Because someone from their side would soon arrive asking for answers. Emily sent an email again, but this time it wasn't short, polite, or well-crafted. It was raw. "Ethan, I have a question for you, and I need you to be honest. Did your parents truly abandon you at the age of 12? I asked Adrian, and he didn't deny it. He simply responded, "It's complicated. But when you recounted that story, you sounded clear, as if you'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. If this is accurate, I need to know more. Please." I stared at the message for a long time. Emily had every reason to close the door and go on. She could have ignored me, spun it in her brain as family drama, or dismissed me as bitter or unstable. She asked for the truth, and I was not going to waste it. So I answered, telling her everything, no drama, no exaggeration, just the facts. I told her about the gas station, the quiet when I returned, how I got through school, how my name was never spoken again, and how they rewrote the family photo as if I were a blemish they could remove. I didn't blame her, and I didn't ask her to take sides. I simply told her the facts and let it sit. She replied the following day, "I believe you and I need time to digest this. They never told me. Adrian claimed he was an only kid until we got engaged. They deleted you, and now I'm wondering what else they've rewritten. Would you be willing to meet for coffee, just the two of us?" It was like watching a crack form in a window that had before been pristine. I knew better than to push, so I said sure, but let her decide the time and place. We met a week later in a quiet cafe 2 towns away from her and Adrian's home. She wore no makeup, pearls or bridal polish, just a hoodie and jeans, hair pulled back, eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept. When she sat down, she didn't even say hello, instead asking, "What else did they do?" So I told her. Not everything, not the minor humiliations, the 1,000 small cuts that never bled enough for anyone else to notice, but the major ones. For example, when my mother forgot my birthday twice in a row and then accused me for not telling her. Or when my father refused to co-sign a minor student loan stating, "You'll just waste it," while handing Adrian $5,000 for a trip to Cancun. Emily's hands remained wrapped around her mug the entire time. She asked questions, took mental notes, and listened without trying to defend them. Adrian added that you said you vanished when you were a teen, that you had a flair for the theatrical, and that they referred to you as a ghost throughout the wedding. I blinked because they used the term ghost. She nodded. I couldn't help but chuckle, not because it was amusing, but because it was so incredibly perfect. They didn't lose a son, I said. They buried one. Emily went quiet, then leaned in with a low voice. "You know what worries me the most?" I waited. She whimpered. "What if they do that to our children someday?" The transition had occurred, and Adrian was unaware of it. Emily stood before she could say anything else, saying she needed time, she was appreciative, and she wasn't ready to talk to him yet. But she'd be in touch. That was 3 days before I received a letter in the mail, with no return address as before, but this time the handwriting was my father's, not my mother's. Inside a note appeared in tight, uneven letters. "Ethan, I'm not sure what you're doing, but this isn't helping anyone, and it's bringing shame on the family. Let it go. If you keep stirring things up, there will be consequences. We gave you a second chance to be included. Do not make us regret it. Dad." There it was. No apologies or regrets. Just a menace disguised as dignity. I sat with the message for a time before placing it next to a photo of myself at the age of 12, 2 artifacts from the same legacy, and I grinned because I finally had the documentation I needed, words penned by his own hand that revealed who he was and still is. I scanned the letter, put it in a secure place, then backed it up on 2 cloud drives before picking up my phone. I called a journalist I met at one of the trauma panels, and she promised me, "If you ever decide to share your story, I'll help you do it right." She answered the first ring. "I'm ready. I replied. But I don't want to just chat. I want to show them. She hesitated and asked, "How far are you willing to go?" I looked down at the note, photo and name on the return invitation that attempted to erase me. "All the way," I said. The piece was titled "Left Behind: One Man's Quiet Escape from a Family That Tried to Erase Him." It went live on Tuesday morning, and before noon, it had been shared thousands of times. Nora Russo, the journalist I worked with, had done her investigation, interviewed Mrs. Grace, corroborated the gas station incident, and even tracked down my old landlady, who vouched that I had put myself through school without family support. The story included a photo of me at 12 standing near a dumpster with a torn backpack and cracked sneakers, quotes from my wedding speech, a letter from my father that had been slightly blurred to protect my privacy, and Emily's permission to mention that she had contacted me afterward. Claire was cautious and exact. This was not a tabloid piece, nor was it a scandal-bait hit job. It was simply the truth, stated cleanly and unvarnished. And that's why it exploded. It wasn't loud. It was genuine. Some people said it reminded them of their own alienation, of being fired, replaced, or silenced. Others applauded my restraint at the wedding, and a few guessed the vineyard, though I never verified it. What mattered more were the private messages I received, which were from people who had been rejected, forgotten, and labeled as problem children by families who refused to accept responsibility. But the finest one came from Emily's older brother, Kensington, whose name was Mark, and he did not mince words. "I'm sorry they did that to you. My parents are upset, not at you, but at Adrian. They feel lied to and used, and they're meeting with Emily today." I didn't respond since I didn't need to. Emily sent another email just 2 days later. "Ethan, I read the story, saw the comments, and showed Adrian. He raged, saying you ambushed him and made it all sound worse than it was, but you didn't. You didn't even reveal everything, which made me think you're speaking the truth. He asked me to make a decision, and I did. I'm remaining at my parents' house for the time being, and the marriage is being called off. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, but I appreciate you not letting me go into that lie with blinders on. Emily." I read the message 3 times before closing my laptop and sitting in silence for quite some time because I wasn't celebrating or gloating. I was remembering. I was remembering when I was 12 years old and stood in our hallway with a gas station candy bar in my hand, thinking they had to come back. And now, some 2 decades later, the family that had abandoned me had finally experienced what it meant to lose control of the narrative. It was not over since my parents called 3 days after the article was published. I'm not sure how they got my phone number. Either from an old friend, or maybe they finally started paying attention to the venues I'd spoken at. But when I noticed an unknown number, I let it go to voicemail and listened. It was my mother, and her voice was shaking with wrath rather than sadness. "Ethan, how dare you? We invited you. We tried to be civil, and you humiliated us. You've ruined Adrian's life. Emily's parents are threatening legal action over the gifts, deposits, and reputation. You think this is justice? It's petty, vindictive cruelty. I hope you're happy and proud of yourself." My father then answered the phone, his voice subdued and almost defeated, rather than angry. "You were always too sensitive, and I should have known you'd develop into the type of man who would turn a moment into a weapon. Congratulations, you've destroyed your family, and don't ever call us again." Then he hung up. I stared at the wall for a while, wondering if the words would pain or reverberate like they used to, but they didn't because I didn't destroy my family. They destroyed the version of me that still needed them, and that was the difference. I stood up, walked to my desk, opened the drawer, and took one more look at the 12-year-old boy who had no idea what he would become. I smiled at him and put the photo away, not to bury the past, but because I had completed writing the finale. The fallout did not hit all at once, it arrived in pieces. First, there were rumors. Mutual acquaintances from my hometown contacted me, people I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Some messaged me privately, shocked, while others felt guilty. I had no idea. I assumed you had moved for college, and your parents had always described you as tough. My parents, who had spent years building their internet image, suddenly went dark, and family images began to disappear from their accounts. The proud parents of Adrian and Emily Banner vanished as well. The most convincing clue is that Adrian's whole wedding album was wiped overnight, with no explanation. Adrian had taken a leave of absence from his job for personal reasons, according to a discreet LinkedIn update, but I was suspicious. Emily completed the annulment, temporarily living with her brother before returning to her studies. She left me a brief message weeks later. "I'm rebuilding, and it's a mess, but it's mine. Thank you again, and I hope you're doing well." I was more than okay. The group urged me to become a regular contributor, and I started working with them part-time, organizing outreach for other affected young adults. I began writing not only articles, but also a novel with the working title, Ghost Son. What happens when they pretend you never existed? I didn't write it for vengeance. I wrote it for the kid I used to be, and for the kids who are still quietly packing a bag they'll never unpack because they're terrified their footsteps will be too loud. One day, I received a letter from Mrs. Grace, not my parents or Adrian, written in her loopy, generous script. Dear Ethan, I clipped your piece, read it twice, and hung it on the wall of my classroom, directly above the desk where I store extra snacks for students who never bring lunch. I occasionally tell them about you, not by name, but by tale, and how being kind isn't only about helping someone out. It's also about remembering them when everyone else has forgotten. I'm so proud of you. Love, Mrs. V. That one made me cry. Not the silent tears I was used to, but real ones that broke something inside. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I wasn't a shadow. Or the forgotten. I was here. I had survived. And now I was alive. So, when people ask me how it felt to stand in front of my family and tell them the truth, I simply grin. Because the finest retribution isn't watching them crumble. It's seeing yourself rise in full daylight while they're still attempting to rewrite the dark, and I have never looked back.